That will never not get me. Shit, which one is it? 1645. Okay, do this one. Thank you, timestamps. Yes. Load the save. Shinjo looked up at the huge white building and sighed loudly. Tokyo General Hospital. It always comes back to this cursed place. After Kurusu's report, he decided to visit it himself. It was almost midnight. Visiting hours were long over, and he didn't have an official warrant. He was here entirely of his own volition. But as he saw it, he was never getting a warrant the usual way, so this was his only shot. Normally, he'd want to slowly, painstakingly build up a case, but it seemed to him that searching this hospital was so important that there just wasn't any time to spare.
久野里美代の話が本当であることをまず確かめる。そうすれば令状なんていくらでも出るようになるはずだ。
Is that how that works? After his own investigations, he'd found that something strange had started happening here in 2007, 2 years before the earthquake. For some reason, these scenes, the text scroll is really slow, and I don't know why. At the time, there was a treatment facility in Shibuya called the Arc Heart Medical Association that was involved in some kind of cult. On the surface, it was a mental health clinic staffed with talented doctors from university hospitals. There was no way to know what they'd actually been doing, but evidently some people had suspected that they were brainwashing troubled patients. But suddenly, the facility was reborn as a hospital with a non-profit assisted living facility. And they're still messed up. And all the doctors that Arc Heart Medical had fired were rehired at Tokyo General Hospital. Oh my god, can we not, though? Jeez, with the close-up, too. Oh my god, the spoon. Then, six years ago, there was the New Generation madness. The fifth victim in that case, Fumio Takashina, the victim of the so-called brain-dead case, who'd been kept alive for a week after his brain was removed. He'd worked at Tokyo General Hospital. Okay, can we not?
一体なんだこの気味の悪い符号は。
That was excessive. There was too much that seemed suspicious.
こういう時、先輩ならどうする?
Then he shook his head. Do it your own way. That's what they would have said. Either way, if he could get proof of what was in this facility's basement, the case would take a whole different turn. Even if there was something big lurking in the shadows behind the case, if he presented incontrovertible proof, the police would have no choice but to act. It wasn't just about the facility, after all. There were a lot of people involved, too. The lives and dignity of the victims who'd been turned into test subjects also mattered.
人体実験か。胸くその悪い話だ。
Yeah. Every year, almost 100,000 people went missing. If some of them had been forced into these experiments, that was a big problem.
それじゃあ一つ行きますか。
His voice was somehow relaxed, yet driven, as he headed into the hospital. He learned and memorized the location of the facility from Kunosato. He snuck in from the ER loading zone and headed to the basement. The temperature there was clearly different from the areas above. And then he went to the autopsy room.
確かここに地下への入り口があると。
He opened the breaker box and saw the card reader inside.
こいつか。
He held out the card key that Kunosato had given him. And he heard the sound of an opening door.
なるほどね。 こりゃ尋常じゃないな。
There was a hidden staircase in the back of the autopsy room. A part of him hadn't believed it until he'd seen it for himself, but now he was essentially sure. A normal hospital wouldn't need something like this. Shinjo stopped for a moment to take a breath, then headed down the stairs. I really hope nothing bad happens to Shinjo. I don't like him as I don't like him nearly as much as Bon yet, but I hope he doesn't. I hope everything goes well for him. I hope he doesn't, you know. I hope he turns out okay. There was an old hallway at the bottom. It smelled of mold and dust. When he turned on his pen light, he saw that it was an old facility and the walls were falling apart.
でも間違いなくここは使われている。
If no one visits a building, it rots away. Unless someone uses it every day, it won't last long. But this place was different. It was old, but he was nearly certain someone was using it.
確かこの先だと言ってたな。
Shinjo followed the directions that Kunosato had given him as he headed toward his goal. His first stop was the monitoring room, which would have critical information on the facility. He wanted the data on the computer there. And then he wanted to find the room where the victims of the experiments were being kept. He turned down many corridors as he headed for his destination. The cell-like rooms he saw on the way concerned him, but they could wait for later. Right now, his biggest job was to get the evidence he needed. I'm really worried for him right now. Shinjo finally found the spot he was looking for. He used his card key to unlock the door. Then he swallowed and put his hand on the doorknob. This is so foreboding. I don't like it. When he got inside, he saw... What'd he see? He quickly ran to the other room, the prison where Uki Yamazoe had kept the test subjects.
冗談じゃない。まさか。
What did he see? He quickly found the room and flung open the door. And then he stood still in astonishment. There was... Oh, they're gone. Oh, god damn it. Nothing there. No victims, no beds. None of the things that Kunosato had told him about. The monitoring room had been empty too. Oh god, they picked up and bounced. There were no security cameras, no computers, nothing at all. All that remained was the simple fact that there was nothing left at all. You know, that's, yeah, makes too much sense. I mean, it's better than him getting murdered, but that also sucks. I don't know why I didn't expect that.
部活行くんだろ?
もちろん、今日はいろいろと事件について整理したいんだ。
んじゃ、行こうぜ。
あ、悪いけど先行っててくれ。
なんだ、用でもあんのか？
用ってか、今日掃除当番。
I pointed to the other students who were moving the desks and sweeping the floors.
ああ。しかしなんで生徒に掃除とかさせるんだろうな。
確かにな。そもそも生徒が学校を掃除するなんて習慣があるのは日本を含めわずかな国だけで。
That is an interesting concept.
一席ぶたなくていいから。んじゃ、後でな。
あ、たく。
Time to get this finished and head to the club room. I saw a scrap of paper lying on the floor next to the garbage bin. Someone had probably tried to throw it in the wastebasket and missed, then left it there. I really wish they'd think about the people that had to do the cleaning before they did that. I took a quick look around. There was another student named Tanaka right nearby who was mopping up the floor. Fortunately, there was no one else around. Okay, let's try this. Oh, he's... I visualized the scrap of paper lifting off the ground. This was more difficult than you'd think. If you lost your concentration for even a moment, it wouldn't work. I mean... I took the scene I'd imagined and tried to strike Tanaka with it. And then... Scrap of paper floated upwards, just like I imagined. And then it floated into the garbage can. I did a little victory pose. Tanaka was looking around in surprise. He looked at me, a little afraid. She? He?
あ、はい。なんですか？
今さ、なんか紙くずがね、勝手にゴミ箱に。
I mean, it must have been the wind.
はあ。
You know, the school wind.
手も触れてないのにゴミ箱に入ったっていうか、ねえ。
まさか何かの見間違いじゃないですか。
うん、そうだよね。
Still, he stared at the garbage can, unsatisfied. I don't know anymore.
ゴミ捨ててきたいんですけど、いいですか？
ごめんね。
I took the garbage can out into the hallway. She's a girl, right? I'm not crazy, right? Okay. That's cool. He figured it out. He figured out how to use it. That's neat. Man, blasting through these chapters.
みんな揃ってるか？
It had already been 3 days since Arimura and I had been attacked by the pyrokinetic. Also, this, like, the lighting here is, like, beautiful. Like, I love it. The oranges, it's great. We'd been worried that she might attack us again, but until now, nothing had happened. Thanks to that, we'd finally calmed down, and today I was feeling good enough to revisit what we knew about the case. So I was wondering if, like, she was Amy, the scary lady. I assume it's a lady, Amy. The scary, like, texting person who's like behind all the, seems to be puppeteering all this. I don't think it's her anymore, because she doesn't seem very organized.
まず話を始める前に紹介。
I think she's just a very vengeful pyrokinetic lady who is understandably upset.
いつもニコニコ笑顔が一番、有村ひなえです。これからよろしくね。こちらこそよろしく。パチパチパチ。
It was still hard to keep up with the way her mood seemed to change all the time. Sarika was applauding, but no one else was. Kazuki was playing ESO or some other game, ESO 2 or some other game like she always did. She turned around to take one look at Arimura, then went back to her computer screen.
有村は別に新聞部に入るわけじゃなく、あくまで協力してくれるということで。
I mean, technically there is no newspaper club right now, right? They got, like, suspended or whatever. Like, the club was... I think they said it wasn't disbanded, but it was, like, on hiatus. What with the stabbing and such.
一応所属は文芸部なんで、でもまあ固いことは抜きにして、とりあえず来れるときは顔出すってことで、どうか一つ。
For what it's worth, I'd already told all the newspaper club members about Arimura's power.
ねえねえ、ひなちゃん、ちょっと聞いていい？
So don't lie to her.
いいよ。
Because she will know.
でも3サイズは乙女の秘密。
Oh my lord.
有村の3サイズは別にな。
おいこらてめえ貴様。
And then her mood changed again.
ひなちゃんってさ、どれが本当なの？明るかったり真面目だったり怖かったり。そうだな、どれだと思う？やだな、そこまで真剣に考え込まれてもな。ただね、一つ言えるとしたらさ、嘘か本当か分かっちゃうっていうのはセリが思ってる以上にずっと大変だってこと。こうやってふざけてないとやってらんないくらいにね。
Yeah, that would sure break me. I would not be able to handle that. Serica seemed lost in thought, as if she didn't really understand.
あ、そうそう、そこのあなた。
Kazuki jumped a little.
ねえねえ彼女、君さ1年だよね。あーごめん、できれば口に出して言ってもらえるかな。ああ、ひなちゃん。
This is
ダメだよ、はなちゃんは喋らないから。
this is her ultimate like this is the counter pick, right? Like this is her power is like super effective against everybody except Kazuki. She is immune.
え、
Incredible. I mean, if anything, I feel like Arimura would immediately want to be besties. Like, finally, somebody
それっ
like
て喋れないってこと？
I don't have to read.
いや、そういうわけじゃないはずなんだけど、とにかく喋りたがらねえんだよ。だから俺たちもまだ一回も和樹の喋ってるとこ聞いたことなかったりしてな。
へえ、そうなんだ。
Arimura stared at Kazuki's face.
オッケーオッケー。和樹はなちゃんでいいんだよね。ってことははなでオッケー？じゃあはな、これからよろしく。
I thought Arimura might have found it difficult to get along with Kazuki, but maybe I was wrong. I mean, yeah, like, finding someone who doesn't, like, who you don't have to constantly tell if they're lying or not, because she doesn't talk. That's kind of great. Since Kazuki didn't talk, it might actually make it easier for her, since she didn't have to worry about knowing if she was lying.
それじゃあ早速始めるか。
That's kind of adorable.
待ってくれ。その前にもう一つ言っておかなきゃいけない。実はクルスが。
遅れちゃってごめんなさい。
Here, she's here. Kurusu opened the door and came inside. Her injury had healed, and Dad had told her it was okay for her to move around, so she'd come back to school today.
副部長。
もう話始まってる？
あ、いや、俺たちは別に例の事件についての話とかこれっぽっちも。
Ito, we're good.
いいんだ伊藤。
She's on the squad now.
あ？
クルスも一緒に事件の解明をしてくれることになった。
え、そうなのか？
ええ、みんなのお目付け役ってところね。
Kurusu glanced at me for just a moment, worried. But it was only for a moment, and then she was back to normal.
とにかく
Dude, the lighting is so good. I love this, like...
少しでもおかしなところがあれば遠慮なく指摘するからそのつもりで。
I love this evening lighting. It's so pretty. The meek attitude she'd had when she'd been hurt was gone, and she was back to her usual self. Ito's shoulders slumped, but at the same time, he looked a little happy. Yeah, he finally doesn't have to worry about her, like, breathing down his... I mean, she will be breathing down his neck, but for a different reason, right? She was always obnoxious, and at times a little annoying, but this was the way everyone wanted Kurusu to be.
じゃあ全員揃ったところでミーティングを始めようと思うんだけど、先に一つ見ておいてほしいものがあるんだ。
お、なんだ？
まだ尾上とクルスにしかちゃんと見せてない。成功率も 100% じゃないから失敗するかもしれないけど。
Oh, is it time?
あ
Ito, Kazuki, and Arimura looked at me in confusion. I nodded and grabbed a pen, then put it on the table. It's really cool that you actually, like, did it. I did not expect it to go this quickly. Like, if at all. I tried my best to focus. And then, just like the scrap of paper earlier, I imagined the pen moving.
問題はここからだ。いけるか。
As I focused as hard as I could, I saw it slowly appear in the corner of my eye. Oh. Yep, there it is. Now all that was left was to imagine my delusion infecting everyone else. That's not the word I would have used. But I suppose it's accurate. The next moment, the pen started to jerk upward. It's an Oopa! Sorry. it's an Oopa pen. And, okay, now I need an Oopa pen. Where can I buy one of those? Because I need it. The three of them raised their voices in surprise as the pen moved slowly upward. It's an Oopa pen! When I stopped imagining the floating pen, the D-sword disappeared from my field of vision, and the pen slammed back down on the table. I don't know where the word quickly came in. I just made it up.
宮代すげえよ。
言った通りまだ完璧じゃないんだけど。
いつの間にできるようになったんです？
尾上に協力してもらっていろいろとやってみたんだ。
Ito gasped in amazement. When the pyrokinetic attacked me, I was forced to accept that I really was a psychic. After that, I decided to master my power instead of running away from it, and I'd gone through a lot of trial and error to do so. At first, I tried to do it on my own, but that didn't go well. And then I remembered what Kunosado had said. She'd said that a gigalomaniac accomplished a real boot by transmitting his delusions into the dead spots of another person's brain to create what she'd called a shared reality. That meant that if I didn't have someone to share my delusion with, it wouldn't work, right? So when I'd started practicing with Serica, things began to go much better.
でも先輩、言っておきますけど、そういうのいい気になって使ったりするとろくなことになりませんからね。有村さんの言う通りよ。
そのくらい分かってるよ。これは僕やみんなの身を守るためにやってるんだ。
ふーん、だったらいいんですけど。
I was telling the truth. I'd managed to turn back the pyrokinetic's flames at the last second. That was the only reason we survived. But that was only a coincidence, born out of desperation. If she was going to come after me again, I needed to master my power. That was why I'd decided to practice like this.
だけどさ、なんでだろうね。
Suddenly, Serica frowned. She was fiddling with her Garo Froggy strap, like she always did when she was thinking about something.
なんでだろうって何がだ？
相変わらずいきなりね、セリカは。あなたの頭の中では話がつながってるのかもしれないけど。
ごめんごめん。そのね、ほら、ひなちゃんは相手の話が嘘か本当かわかるんでしょ？で、タクは物が動かせる。人によって使える力に違いがあるのはなんでかなって。
I'd never thought about that before. She had a point. Why did different people have different powers? Kunosado hadn't said anything about that.
つうかさ、そもそもその能力自体いつからお前らに備わってたんだろうな。生まれつきか？
That was another thing I'd been wondering about.
宮代、お前はどうなんだ？
少なくとも僕自身はここ最近まで自分にそんな能力があることを自覚してなかった。だから正直わからない。
そんじゃあ有村は？
私は多分渋谷地震の後ですかね。あれ以降急に人の言葉の嘘がわかるようになったっていうか。
So in Arimura's case, she'd suddenly become able to tell if people were lying after the Shibuya earthquake.
ってことはあの地震に何か関係があるのか？
I'd have to look into that eventually.
あと今のセリの疑問、どうして人によって能力が違うのかって話だけど、それについてはなんとなく思ってることがあって。何？多分願望なんじゃないかなと。
願望？
そうです。私地震の時にちょっぴりそう思うことがありまして、で気づいたらこんな感じになってたっていうか。
そう思うことって？
やだなあ。だから本当のことか知りたいって話。言わせないでよ、恥ずかしい。
いや別に照れるとこじゃねえだろ。
そもそも本当のことが知りたいなんて一体何があったんだよ。
やだ先輩、やらしい。
You brought it up!
なんでそうなる？
そういうのは痛いけな乙女の秘密なんですよ。だから聞いちゃダメ。ね。
When Arimura was like this, I knew I wasn't going to get anything out of her.
とにかく一旦これまでのことを整理してみようか。ニュージェネの狂気の再来事件、その被害者には明らかに共通するポイントがあったよな。
っていうとあれだね。
そう、前にも推測した通り全員何らかの能力者だということだ。最初の事件、こっちみんな被害者とその特徴は
was famous for being able to predict the future.
そう、多分予知能力があったってことだ。次は音漏れ炭。被害者とその特徴は
Put those who heard her music into a trance.
トランスっていうと、歌を聴いた人の気持ちがうわーって気持ちよくなることかな。
Hers still makes me the most sad. Like she just wanted to play music, man. I don't know. Maybe there's more to that than what we saw, but like she just wanted to go and play music for people in the countryside. Like she wanted to leave. She was like, I don't like this. I'm just gonna go and share my and then she died. Why?
まあそんなよ
It
うなもの
sucks
ですか
so
ね。
much.
つまり相手の感情を歌で誘導できたってことだな。
Like, I mean, I guess I also feel bad for the first guy, too. The third guy. I guess I feel bad for all of them, but, like, her in particular, I don't know why. I don't know why I'm so, like...
で、僕たちが目撃した回転デッド。被害者とその特徴は
I was just so emotionally invested in her story, as short as it was. Was said to be able to read clients' minds.
多分柿田って人はテレパシーを持っていたんだ。
ええ、その通りです。私にはそう言ってました。
そして学園祭で起きたごっつぁんです。被害者とその特徴はそう、渡部が有名になったスクープ写真は全てありえない角度や場所から撮られているものばかりだった。多分連写だったんだろう。
I like how all of these are like established, sort of relatively established, like, psychic powers terms, right? Mind reading, like telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, all this, and then psychic photography, as if that's like I mean, I don't know, maybe it is, but I literally have never heard that term before. Like, oh yes, you know, psychic photography. Everybody knows about psychic photography, right? No, I do not. Precognition, that's a thing.
やっぱり私が言った通りですよ。どの能力者も願望が入ってる気しませんか？
願望か。こっちみんなの大谷はもともとニコニア動画で生放送していて、
was able to become famous.
音漏れたんの高柳は新庄さんの話だと確か。
She became a popular vocalist and succeeded in breaking my heart with why?
回
It's
転デッドの
so unnecessary.
さんは、僕たちじゃわからないな。有村は何か知ってるか？
そういう話はあんまりしませんでした。けど仕事でいつも裏切りとか騙し合いとかあったみたいで。でも能力を持ってからはその心配もなくなったって。
そしてごっつぁんですの渡部か。なるほどな。こうしてみると確かに有村の言う通りかもしれない。
つまり願望がその人の能力に影響してるっていうことね。
ってことは宮代のその能力も何かの願望が現れてるってことか？
手を触れずに物を動かせたらとか、そんな風に考えたことあるんですか、先輩？
いや、僕は。
Couldn't think of any reason why I'd want that power.
あれじゃないタク。ほらあの時タクって地震の後ずっと寝込んでたじゃない？そういえばあの頃のタクルは歩くのも大変だったから。
Just like Kurisu said, I had been badly injured during the earthquake. Even after I'd finally woken up from my coma, just walking was incredibly painful. It was bad enough that it would take tens of minutes just to grab something a few feet away. I'd hated that, and I'd wished 1,000 times that the thing I was trying to get would just come to me. Well, that makes sense.
それじゃあ、あれが僕の能力に影響しているっていうことなのか。
なるほどな。願望が能力に現れる説ってのはほぼ正解と考えて良さそうだな。
それじゃああの女、僕たちを襲ったあの女の能力も何らかの願望ってことになるのか。
何かを燃やしたいと思ったってこと？
I imagine she wanted to burn everything. But that's just a guess.
そこまで思い詰めるほど燃やしたいものってなんだろうな。
お芋とか？
冗談言ってる場合かよ。
いえ、先輩、セリは本気でそう思ってます。
I knew that she wasn't joking, but also the fact that Arimura can just be like, no, she was being 100% genuine.
マジか。
That's so funny.
なんかおかしなこと言った？
Yeah, you did, Serica.
まあいい。あの女がどうしてパイロキネシスを持つようになったかは今は置いとこう。もう一つ、あの女について考えたいことがある。大事なことなんだ。
I looked at the faces of everyone in the room.
あいつが これまでの猟奇殺人事件の犯人かどうかってことだ。
She had clearly been trying to kill us. But that didn't mean she was behind all the murders. I do not think she's behind the murders. I don't think she's behind them at all. I think... I thought that at first, but now she's just too chaotic. These are all like very meticulous. I looked back at the board.
和樹、例のものを頼め。
I took the image that I'd asked Kazuki to print out for me.
ニュージェネの狂気の再来の話題で埋もれてしまってるけど、ここ最近渋谷で連続放火事件が起きてる。
Everyone seemed to know this. They nodded.
それが起こった場所とこれまでの事件の場所を比較してみようと思うんだ。まず最初の事件、こっちみんな。現場はここ。それに連続放火事件の現場を重ねる。
Okay.
うわあ、すごいね。
だろ。次は第2の事件、音漏れ炭。現場はここだ。ここに連続放火事件の現場を重ねると、
おいおい、マジか。
そして第3の事件、回転デッドが発生したラブホテル。このラブホテルの周りでも不審火が異常に発生してる。
確かに集中してるわね。
そうなんだ。そして第4の事件、ゴッツァンデスはみんなも知ってる通りこの学園で起こった。そしてそれに連続放火事件の現場を重ねてみると、
なんかすごいですね。
だろ。マップ全体を見てもらえばもっとよくわかる。最初にこれに気づいた時は僕も驚いたよ。で、これらのデータから考えると、
ニュージェネの狂気の再来事件と不審火との間にはなんか関係があるかもしれないってことか。
ああ、この通り偶然にしてはあまりにも場所が一致しすぎてる。あの女との因果関係を疑っていいんじゃないかと思う。
When I finished, Sarika said, "Wow, you're amazing, Taku." But everyone else seemed lost in thought.
何か異論でもあるか？
異論とまではいかないけど、ちょっといいかしら。
Kurusu raised her right hand. What? That's not what it says at all! She raised her head. That's what it says. I can
何でも言っ
read.
てくれ。
ね。
She stood up in such a way as to not put pressure on her injury, and then moved in front of the board.
再確認なんだけれど、タクルたちを襲った女の人の能力っていうのは
Pyrokinetic.
そう、炎を使う能力だったのよね。
ああ。
でもこれまでの殺人事件では炎なんて一回も使われていないじゃない。最初がこっちみんなだっけ？次が音漏れた？そして回転デッド。この学園で起こったのはゴッツァンですね。殺人事件にこんな名前をつけるなんて不謹慎だわ。ほら見て、どれも炎なんて出てこないでしょ。あれれ、確かにそうだね。
Kurusu had caught one of the weak points in my argument. I thought that was strange too. None of the murders had involved fire. which meant that we had very little evidence to suggest that she was the killer.
なあ、こういうのはどうだ。ハッカー女は自分の能力を試していたとか。
試す？
ああ、発火能力を身につけるまで自分で自分の能力がよく分かっていなくてさ、いろんなことを試してたんだ。それで殺害方法にいくつものパターンがあった。
なるほど。しんちゃん頭いいね。
Sarika was impressed, but
でもそれってちょっと無理ないですか？
Arimura said it before I could.
そうか？
いくらなんでも強引すぎるかなって。
私もそう思うけど。
そうか。
Everyone fell silent. We'd only just started, but there was too much we didn't know.
あの女が犯人だとするなら、なぜ炎を使わないで殺人を行ったのか。そしてなぜあんな殺し方ができたのか。いや、待てよ。
I suddenly got an idea.
なあ有村、ちょっと聞きたいんだけど。
なんです？
お前結構久野里さんと一緒にいたよな。
好きで一緒にいたわけじゃないですけどね。
No one wants to hang out with her. Arimura's disgust was plain. She must have really hated Kunosato.
久野里さんは能力について研究してるんだろ？何か言ってなかったか？ギガロマニアックスが持てる能力の数とか。
数ですか？
ああ、今まで気づかなかったけど、能力者は一人で一つの能力しか持つことができないとか決まってるんだろうか？
さあどうなんでしょう。でも確かにそんな制限久野里さんから聞いたことはないですね。
リアルブートの理屈から考えれば、妄想さえうまくコントロールできればどんな能力だって使えると思うんだよな。つまり一人で複数の能力を持つことも可能なんじゃないかってことなんだけど。
Ito put his hand on his chin and thought.
宮代たちを襲った女は単なるパイロキネシストじゃないってことか。
あくまでも可能性の一つだけど、どうだろう。
まだ決定的とは言えないわね。
だったらさ、犯人の女には別の能力を持った仲間がいるという可能性もあるんじゃないか。
仲間？ああ、そっか。複数犯ってことだな。それとあとは最初に戻ってしまうけど、パイロキネシストは事件とは無関係で、犯人は全く別の誰かという可能性。
その場合、タクルたちが襲われた事件とこれまでの連続殺人事件は別のものだと考えるってことね。
うん。
There were too many possibilities to really know what was going on.
ねえ、とりあえずこの件は保留にしない？多分結論は出ないわ。
そうだな。とりあえず今はこのまま置いとこう。
宮代と有村は警察に話したんだよな。お前らを襲った女のこと。
はい。
警察から何か情報はないのか？ The night we were attacked, we contacted Shinjo and told him what had happened, along with a description of our attacker. Arimura had said she'd helped draw a composite sketch too. The police had decided to look for her as a suspect in the arson case. If they could find her, they'd arrest her for that. Once they had her in custody, they could find out if she was responsible for the murders.
何か分かったら連絡をくれるはずなんだけど、特に何もない。女の特定に至ってないんだと思う。
そっか。じゃあ女に関する推理は今のところここまでしかできないな。
だと思う。
My throat was dry from all the talking, so I looked inside my bag. One mountain view, please. There it is. Of course, I'd brought a mountain view. I opened it and took a gulp. Everyone else had grabbed a drink of their own and took a moment to relax.
あともういくつか俺が気になってることを言ってもいいか。
頼め。
まず一つ目な。被害者は全員能力者だよな。犯人はどうやってターゲットの能力者を見つけてるんだ？
Ito's question was a good one, and one I'd known was coming.
それについては一応考えてある。犯人は能力者を特定するために多分力士シールを使ってるんじゃないかと思うんだ。
力士シールを？
正確には11番目のロールシャッハ AH 東京総合病院の地下にデータがあっただろ。あのシールを見せられた能力者は激しい反応を示すって。
Very unpleasant.
それは僕や有村も経験済みだ。
思い出しただけでちょっと。
Arimura closed her eyes and put her hand over her mouth. She must have felt like she was going to throw up.
大丈夫有村さん？
はい、すみません。続けてください、宮代先輩。
ああ。で、伊藤や尾上は地下で見たと思うけど、街中のシールが監視されてたよな。カメラで。能力者の素質がある人間を集めて、その地下施設で実験するために。
I could see Kurusu's expression cloud. She had probably remembered her friend, Minamisawa Senri, who'd been a test subject down there. It hurt to see her like that, but I decided that I had no choice but to go on anyway.
だから犯人はあの地下施設の出身者じゃないかと思うんだ。力士シールの秘密を知っていれば能力者の特定は容易だろ。シールを見て過剰反応を起こしてる人間を探し出せばいい。事実僕や有村も力士シールのせいでパニックに陥った時、あの女に狙われたわけだし。
じゃあ犯人は地下施設の監視カメラを利用してるっていうのか？それは無理だろ。あそこへ入るにはカードキーとか必要だし。
それにもう廃墟みたいだったよ。シールの監視とかされてなかったし、実験もやってなかったし。
いや、あの施設にいなくてもシールの監視だけならできる。
え？
Kurusu nodded as if she understood.
タクルの言いたいこと分かったわ。カメラで監視してるとかじゃなく、実際にシールの近くで見張っていて、タクルや有村さんのような反応を見せた人を狙うのね。
そう、パイロキネシストの女もシールの近くに潜んで待ってたんじゃないかな。クモの巣に獲物がかかるのを待つように。そして僕と有村が見事に引っかかった。
そいつはしかし気の長い話だな。
でも不可能じゃない。
けどさ。
待って、その点に関しても今議論したって結論は出ないわ。保留にして次へ行きましょう。
保留ばっかりだね。いいのかな。
仕方ないわ。とにかく今は疑問点を出していくのが先だから。伊藤君、まだ気になることがあるのよね。
あと2つなんだけど。
Ito asked his two remaining questions. Summed up, this is what they were.
なぜ今回の事件はかつてのニュージェネ事件と同じ日付に起きているのか。そもそもその動機は何なのか。
Also a fair question.
なんだかまるで騒ぎになること自体が目的みたいにも見えるわね。
そうだな。
Everything, from the dates to the way the murders were committed, was chosen to be as sensational as possible. Was it just to attract attention, or was it a message meant for a specific person?
それが犯行動機なんですかね。私知ってるよ。愉快犯って言うんだよね、そういうの。
Yes?
劇場型犯罪とも言うよな。
もしこの先もニュージェネ事件と同じ日付に犯行が行われるなら、次はノータリン事件と同じ日。 10月23日ってことになるけど、
Which also meant nothing was going to happen until then.
なるほど、だからか。
Ito suddenly snapped his fingers as if he'd reached some great conclusion.
お前と有村さ、パイロキネシストに襲われたけど、結局女は宮代たちを殺さなかった。
あ
それって要するに殺す日じゃなかったってことじゃないかな。
あ、殺す日じゃなかった。
Did that mean it wasn't my power that saved us? No, but it had really felt like she was going to kill us. The more I thought about it, the more confused I felt.
それじゃあ私はそろそろ生徒会の方へ行くけど、くれぐれも私のいないところで危険なことはしちゃダメよ。約束してくれるわね。
そんな何回も念を押さなくても分かってるよ。
本当ね。
うん。
It had been a while since Kurusu had glared at me like that. Now that the Empress was back, she was scary.
ああ、そうそう。それからタクル、あなた。
Kurusu got in close and whispered to me.
今夜から青葉寮に帰ってきなさい。
え？
狙われているのかもしれないんでしょ。今の場所に一人でいては危険よ。ずっととは言わないわ。しばらくで構わない。事件が解決するまでうちで暮らしなさい。
いや、でもさ。
ダメ。問答無用。もし帰ってこなかったらこっちから連れに行くからね。それじゃ。
あ、ちょっと
I mean, that's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Like, she's got a point. It's dangerous for him to be alone, but also the fact that they're after him specifically, or people like him, means he would be putting the others in danger, right? Before I could say anything, she ran off to the student council room.
生徒会長のくせに廊下を走っちゃダメだろ。
Damn.
副部長なんだって？
いや、別にこっちの話だよ。
She wanted me to go back to the dorm? What should I do? There was no real need to listen to her, but knowing Kurusu, she might really come barging into my RV.
しかしな、いくら考えてもわかんねえことばっかだったな。
I love when multiple people show up at once. It's just like, whoa, hey there! The squad!
そうですね。なんか頭痛くなってきちゃったよ。ねえ、タク。タク？
え？ああ、そうだな。
We hadn't really learned anything today. We had no proof, just a bunch of guesses.
なあ、久野里さんに相談してみるってのはどうだ？
久野里さんか。
ほら、彼女なら俺たちの知らないこといろいろ知ってるんじゃねえのかなって。
ああ、それはやめといた方がいいっすよ。
Arimura shot down his idea.
なんで？
Thank you.
あれ言ってませんでしたっけ？あの人ってば私たちのこと人間だと思ってませんから。伊藤先輩だってあの人にひどい態度取られてたじゃないすか。それともそういうの喜んじゃう系とか？だったら私もそうしてあげますけど。
だから俺はそういう趣味はねえっての。宮代と同じこと言うな。
I mean, she strangled you like 3 times, my guy. Arimura had gotten the same idea about Ito that I had. I laughed a little. And then Arimura turned to us with a smile and continued.
別に冗談じゃないんですけどね。私、人の言ってることが本当かどうかわかるんですよ。久野里さん、私たちによくひどいこと言いますけど、本気で私たちが死ねばいいと思ってますから。
え？
That was a surprise. I'm not surprised. Did she really hate us that much? What did we do? Arimura continued on, in the same chipper tone a girl might use to discuss after-school plans with a friend.
あの人の目には私たち害虫駆除のための実験台にしか見えてないみたいです。害虫と同じ扱いでいいんですか、伊藤先輩。
Heart. After the meeting in the newspaper club ended, I bought a Mountain View at the vending machine in the cafeteria and sat down on a nearby bench. I'd been thinking so much that I was exhausted. I opened the plastic bottle and swallowed down the bubbling carbonation inside. Delicious.
またそれ飲んでるのかよ。お前ほんと好きだな。
Ito bought a can of black coffee and sat down on the bench with me.
けどさっきはびっくりしたな。お前の能力だよ。
ま、僕自身もまだ驚いてるけどな。
とにかく感心したっていうか、普通にかっこよかったぜ。
やめろって、男に言われても一つも嬉しくない。
That's something the heroine says to the male lead in a romantic comedy. And then the hero falls in love, maybe.
いや、それもないな。
A series of faces flitted through my mind. Sarika with her dopey laugh, the ever-angry Kurusu, Kazuki playing ESO2, and Arimura with her acid tongue. Acid tongue. But I couldn't imagine starting a romance with any of them.
なんだよ、せっかく褒めてやったのに。よっ。
Ito threw the empty can at the garbage bin.
あ、惜しい。
全然惜しくないだろ。
The garbage can had a lid, and only a small hole to throw the cans in. Of course, there was no way he could get it inside.
なあなあ、またやってみせてくれないか？
何を？
だから能力だよ。
Boy. It's not a toy, Ito. Ito looked around at the cafeteria as he spoke, making sure no one was too close. This dude's gonna get us in trouble. Like, this is not gonna go well. Why was this why he'd thrown the can? Fortunately, it was after school and the cafeteria was just about to close, so there weren't many people in the room. Sure. We'll do this one. There were a few groups of people who were probably chattering about nothing important, and a few boys and girls intently reading their books. Nobody was paying attention to us. I didn't think anyone would see me and make a fuss, but...
お前ってどのくらいのものが動かせるんだ？重さとか大きさとか数とか。
その辺はまだテストしてないな。
じゃあ狙いは正確なのか？ターゲット以外のものが動いちゃったりしないのか？
それもまだ。
That was a good point. It would be best to check that stuff. What should I do? Whatever this does. Okay, let's try this.
遊びでやるんじゃないぞ。能力を磨くためだからな。
Oh, fun little detail. It doesn't have little delusion corner things. So that's cool.
お、そうこなくちゃ。
あと、横から余計なこと言うなよ。意識を集中させないとちゃんとできないんだ。
I stared at the can that Ito had just thrown. I imagined it flying into the little hole in the garbage can. I could see the D-sword appear in the corner of my vision. I'd gotten pretty good at this part. The next part was the hard one. I tried to focus on the image in my mind.
宮代、ストップ。
あ、
I was interrupted by a quiet yell from Ito.
なんだ？
Surprised, I turned toward Ito, and then my mouth flew open with shock. What? I hadn't seen them because the vending machine was blocking my view, but 2 girls were walking up to the bench. I saw them and panicked, and tried to shut down my power. But that was the worst thing I could have done. Oh god, no. Ito, what have you done? This is all your fault. I mean, sure. The coffee can ended up heading towards one of the girls' feet instead of the garbage can. She didn't see it coming. There was a chance. Well, should I just not? Like, I guess just not is an option, right? Just pretend it didn't. There was a chance she might slip on it? Okay, well, then we gotta move it then. If she hurt herself, it would be my fault. What should I do? Should I use my power again to stop it? Yes. The second I told it to stop, it changed its course as if a giant hand had come down and smashed it from above. It fell to the ground with a huge clatter. The 2 girls leapt up at the sudden noise and then turned toward us. When they did, one of their skirts flew up. What?
Huh?
Why? As the girl spun, she quickly put her hands on her skirt. And then our eyes met.
やだ。
Why?
キモい。何ジロジロ見てんの？
違います。缶の音にびっくりしただけで、別に何も見てないというか、
But the 2 of them glared at me warily, then ran up the stairs. I mean, that could have, let's be honest, that could have gone way worse. Like, what was that about? Even if it was my fault, I'd saved them from danger. And from where I was sitting, I couldn't see anything anyway.
なるほど。そうか。青だな。
Was this his plan all along? I guess he could, though.
いや、それよりもだ。
Ito got to see what was under her skirt, and I didn't. And when they turned toward us, he looked away with speed that rivaled being a psychic power in its own way, and pretended he'd seen nothing. Wow. So I was the only one who got branded a pervert.
おい、伊藤。
いやー、すげえ能力だな、今の。
I was pissed, but for some reason, Ito was looking at me with newfound respect.
何？
こんなにうまくスカートの中を覗けるなんて最高だ。尊敬するぜ。
そんなの狙ってない。
え？違うの？
違う。
なんだ、つまんね。
お前も帰れ。
いやいやいや、よく聞けよ。
No. Ito suddenly took on the air of a scientist and leaned closer toward me.
近い、気色悪い。
いいから聞けって。
なんだよ。
お前は今俺たち男子生徒の神になったんだ。
Right.
は？
What the hell was he talking about?
あ、タクとしんちゃん見つけ。
As I furrowed my brow, Sarika came down the stairs toward us.
こんなとこにいたんだね。私もなんか飲もう。
マウンテンビューにしろよ。
Sarika nodded hesitantly, then put her coins into the vending machine and hit the button for the drink next to the Mountain View. Dr. P. I'm more of a Dr. P person myself. There was a thud as the bottle dropped into the bottom compartment. No.
今だ。
No.
あ？
I will not.
あのペットボトルを床に落として転がせ。
I refuse.
なんだよいきなり。
いいからやってみせろって。
Do not indulge this
この能力の訓
behavior.
練だから。
ああ。
No. Yeah, sure, why? Do not indulge this man. I didn't really know what was going on. You know what's going on. But I tried to visualize the bottle Serica was reaching for, falling to the floor. The D-sword was still there in the corner of my eye, and it was easy to send the image into both of their brains. God damn it. The bottle flew out of Serica's hand, just like I wanted. And it rolled along the floor, just like I'd envisioned. This is so mean, why? Serica stretched out her hand toward the bottle and ran after it. Of course, she was leaning forward. I'm not pleased with this turn of events. I'm not thrilled. No, I won't do it. I refuse. No.
予想通り純白フリルだったか。
Damn it, Ito. From where Ito was looking, he could see her perfectly. I'm not doing it. I refuse. I don't know what it is, but I'm not doing it. No. Stop. Cease this. I took a half step forward. I could probably see it too, but that half step felt very difficult to take. I finally knew what Ito was after, but I couldn't stop the bottle from rolling quickly. Serica was running after it with her hand stretched out and her back toward us. I stood up from the bench and moved between Ito and Serica.
何をするんだ神様
You got problems, man.
だってなこのエロ神さては独り占めするつもりか人聞きの悪いこと言うな
No. As I panicked, I tried to conceal Serica from his field of vision as best I could. And then, I heard a cheerful, oblivious voice from behind me.
びっくりした。なんかペットボトルが生きてるみたいだったよ。どんどん逃げてっちゃうんだもん。
I turned around slowly. Serica was holding the bottle in both hands with her usual dopey grin on her face.
これ蓋を開けたらプシューって炭酸が噴き出すよねきっと。
Serica walked back toward us as she spoke. Eyes up, mister. Tried to stop myself from looking at the hemline of her skirt as it moved. When I thought about what I just tried to do, and the way she smiled, I shook my head vigorously. I heard a laugh from Ito and glared over at him. He whistled innocently. Oh my lord, this guy. October 15th, 2015, Saturday. Thursday! What the hell is wrong with me? It said Thursday! What? The medical examiner system. The system allows for an examination, or in some cases an autopsy, to determine the cause of death in accidents, or when a person has died from a disease or an unknown cause. Let me just, medical examiner system. A legal system that allows for a coroner as well as a doctor has been given permission by the area's governor to dissect a body that has died under suspicious circumstances and determine the cause of death. The system is only in use in Yokohama, Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe, as well as the 23 wards of Tokyo. Many people believe that Japan lags behind the rest of the world in this area, and every year there are calls for the system's expansion, but as of now there are no signs that it will actually take place. Gotcha. The work of the medical examiner is done as follows. In the event of an unusual death, first, the forensic officer conducts an examination, followed by a post-mortem from the medical examiner. If the cause of death can be determined, then the body is then turned over to the family. If the post-mortem examination fails to determine the cause of death, then only then does the examiner conduct an autopsy. and if it is judged that a crime was involved, a further, more expansive judicial autopsy is conducted, but such an autopsy had already been performed on Tomoaki Watabe. It was extremely unusual for a second autopsy, like this one, to be performed.
どうだ
Shinjo averted his eyes from the coroner's knife. He'd been to many judicial autopsies, but it was something he'd never gotten used to. He probably never would, he thought. As for the person standing next to the coroner, she was staring at the open skull without the slightest trace of disgust.
やはり肥大化の傾向が見られるな。
肥大化というと脳が
この状況で他に何がある？解凍された頭を見て内臓の肥大がわかるとでも言うのか？
Can you... Shinjo's shoulders slumped a little. When he'd first met her, he'd been unsure of how to handle her, but now he actually felt kind of worried for her. Didn't that get tiring after a while? What, being such a bitch? Yeah, I imagine it's exhausting.
窒息死ということだったが。
窒息だけでこんな風にはならない。
ってことは、これまでの被害者と同じってわけか。脳の肥大の原因については？
何しろ検体が少なすぎる。果たしてこの症状が一連の被害者だけに見られるのか、それともギガロマニアックスに共通するものなのか。
わからないか。
知る方法ならあるにはあるがな。
何？
We're not dissecting the Gigalomaniacs.
あの二人、宮代拓と
We're not doing it.
有村ひなえの頭
I
を
knew she was gonna say
調べればいい。
that. What a fucking psycho.
そうすればこれがギガロマニアックスに共通する症状なのかどうかわかるだろう。
バカなことを言うなよ。そんなことできるわけがないだろ
う。冗談だ。今は CT や MRI があるんだ。わざわざ脳をむき出しにする必要もない。
She wasn't joking.
なんだ。私が冗談を言うのがそんなに意外か？
You weren't joking.
いや。
Shinjo thought to himself that she probably wasn't joking. She didn't like Gigalomaniacs. She hated them. And from the bottom of her heart, he didn't know why she despised them so much. Of course, there was probably a good reason for it, but he wished she would tone it down a bit. They probably didn't become Gigalomaniacs by choice, and more than anything, he didn't want to lose their help with the case. Doesn't mean there's probably a good reason for it. I disagree. I think there's probably a reason for it. I hesitate to assume it's a good reason. If there were still test subjects under the hospital, there were things the police could do. But when he'd gone down there, there wasn't a trace of anything left.
証拠ならあるだろう。
Kunosato's voice was as cold as ever.
証拠？
何のためにあの娘を連れ出したと思ってるんだ。知ってることを全部吐かせろ。
おいおい、相手は子供だぞ。
子供じゃない。危険なギガロマニアックスだ。
Shinjo rubbed his temples, unsure of what to say. Leave the room, please. Quit being such an asshole. Those are just some suggestions. October 15th, 2015, Thursday. Not Saturday. Thursday. That's what that word is. Thursday, not Saturday. Trustworthiness Investigation Corporation, Frisia. Are you? What are you, Momose? What is your deal? Katsuko Momose sat in a reception room in the messy corner of her office and sighed as she ran her hand through her hair.
返してください。私を返してください。
No matter how many questions she asked, or how she tried to get her to talk, that was the only answer she got. Sometimes she tried asking if there was anything she wanted, or if she felt like eating anything. But the answer was always the same.
お願いです。返してください。
She hadn't made even the tiniest bit of progress since the girl had arrived. Even the endlessly patient Momose would want to sigh after all that. She still didn't know where this Uki Yamazoe girl was from, or how she'd ended up at the hospital, in that hospital. But from what she'd seen, there was a chance she'd endured significant abuse. And then she was suddenly rescued from it and taken to a completely different environment, so she must have been very confused. She knew from experience that victims like that needed to be treated very carefully.
私が早く帰らないと皆さんが困ってしまうんです。
She kept repeating the same lines, like a broken audio player. Momose was starting to think it was time for a different approach. She didn't know what would happen if she told the girl this, so she'd kept it a secret up until now.
ちゃんと話して現実を認識させてあげた方がいいかもしれない。
お願いです。私はあそこへ戻らないといけないんです。
しょうがない。話してみようか。
Once she made a decision, she didn't spend any time on second thoughts. This was both an advantage and a disadvantage.
ね、ウキちゃん。
はい。
そこまで帰りたいというのなら教えてあげるわ。
返してくれるんですね。ありがとうございます。
聞いて。あなたがどれだけ帰りたいと望んでももう無理なのよ。
無理。
だってあなたがいたあの場所、病院の地下にあったあの場所はもうなくなってしまったんだから。
Momose was relieved to finally see shock on Uki's face.
よかった。この子にはちゃんと普通の感情がある。
Like Kurusu had said, they hadn't done any operations on her that would destroy her ability to experience emotions.
この前ね、あなたがここへ来てからすぐに刑事、若いくせにくたびれた刑事いたでしょ。彼が例の病院へ行ってみたんですって。
The girl simply listened to Momose speak, her eyes wide. Momose kept talking, watching her carefully.
それでね、解剖室から地下へ行ったそうよ。あなたのいた場所へね。でもね、そこには何もなかったって。あなたがいた部屋の中も空っぽだったそうよ。
そんな、じゃあ皆さんは、あそこにいた皆さん
いなかったそうよ。誰も。
誰も。
Uki seemed to be trying her best to understand what Momose just said. And then...
嘘です。
そんな嘘ついて何になるの。本当のことよ。
だってそれじゃあ私はどうすれば。私はどうすれば。
Tears started to silently fall from Uki's eyes. Well, that's heartbreaking.
はは、どうしたタグル、神気臭い顔しやがって。
顔は生まれつきだよ。
They went home after all.
は、なんだ、もう少し面白いこと言ったらどうなんだ。
Dad was as jovial as ever. Without his lab coat, no one would ever believe he was a doctor.
どうだ、やっぱ自分の家が一番落ち着くだろ
う。別にそうでも。
ま、一人暮らしを始めたばっかじゃまだそうは思えないか。でもな、いずれわかる時が来るもんだ。我が家が一番ってな。
In the end, I'd come back here to Oba dorm. Oba dorm. Because Kurusu had told me to do so at school.
狙われているのかもしれないんでしょ。今の場所に一人でいては危険よ。ずっととは言わないわ。しばらくで構わない。事件が解決するまでうちで暮らしなさい。
I wasn't her slave or anything, but just like she said, it was dangerous to be alone right now. Especially when we didn't know who the killer was, or what they were after. If someone was nearby, it would be easier to get a hold of Shinjo and his allies if I needed to. And I was probably never going to be able to tell this to Kurusu, but the feelings I'd felt when I'd left home were starting to disappear. After seeing Kurusu get hurt, or try to protect me, or cry for my sake despite being such a strong girl, I'd started to understand some things that I hadn't known when I'd left. I realized what I was thinking and shook my head. No way. I wasn't like Yuto, who could never seem to get away from his sister.
おい、何赤くなってんだよ。
なんでもない。
とにかくさっさと荷物置いてこい。お前の部屋はノノのやつがちゃんと掃除してくれてる。
ああ。
Dad didn't get mad when I'd left, or when I'd come back. Come to think of it, he'd only said one thing on the day I'd left.
そうせざるを得なかったノノの気持ちがわかるようになったら戻ってこい。じゃあな。
荷物置いてくる。ねえ、
父さん、タクル兄が帰ってくるって。
As I went toward my room, Yui appeared. I could see Yuto behind her.
おう、タクルならもう帰ってきてんぞ。
Yui's face almost broke into a broad smile when she saw me, but quickly forced herself to assume a strict expression.
何やってんの？
え？
お風呂とキッチンと廊下の掃除。タクル兄が当番の時、私とユウが代わりにやってたんだから。
悪い。
I apologized without thinking.
これからしばらく私たちの当番、タクル兄が代わってよね。いい？
That how that works?
タクル兄ちゃん、別にいいよ。僕気にしてないから。
ダメ。こういうことはきちんとしなきゃいけないんだから。親しき仲にもって言うでしょ。
でもそんなこと言ったらタクル兄ちゃんまたどこか行っちゃうよ。せっかく帰ってきたのに。
ダメなものはダメなの。
なあタクル、ユイのやつノノに似てきたと思うか？
うん。特に怒ってる顔が。
なんか言った？
いえ、なんでもないです。ごめんなさい。
Yui put her hands on her hips and puffed her flat chest to glare at me. She did look just like Nono when she did that.
もう父さんが甘やかすからタクル兄は勝手なことばっかり。
おっと、今度はこっちに飛び火か。
で、タクル兄、もうどこにも行ったりしないんでしょうね。
いや、
タクル兄がいなくなってどれだけノノ姉が悲しんでたか分かってる？ユウだってすっごく寂しがってたんだから。
そっか。
私も私は別に何でもなかったけど。
We don't need our Imura to tell if she's telling the truth. And suddenly, the expression on her face changed.
何でもなかったけど。
おい。ゆい
Stop that. I'm not good with that stuff. I can't handle it when people cry. Yui covered her face with her hands, then ran into her room. Yuto followed quickly after her. Dad scratched his head and sighed a little as he saw them go.
ほら、さっさと荷物置いてこい、タクル。
わかった。
I got away as quickly as I could. That scared me. I didn't expect Yui to start crying all of a sudden. I thought nothing would really change around here, even if I left. But did they really need me here that much? If they did...
いや、でも。
Since I was lost in thought, the knocking sound startled me.
誰だ?
What? I don't think that's correct. I believe what he actually said was, "Who's there?"
タクル兄ちゃん。
ああ、ユウトか。
のの姉ちゃんが着替えたら降りてこいってご飯だって。
ああ、サンキュー。どうした？
さ、ゆいお姉ちゃんのことだけど。
Yui... I think that's Yuto. Yuto crossed his hands over his stomach and fidgeted as he looked up at me.
お姉ちゃん、なんかいろいろ怒ってたけど、本当はずっとタクル兄ちゃんに帰ってきてほしいって言ってて、だから怒ってたのは本気じゃなくって。
They're testing me to see if I remember people's names.
大丈夫。
It's all a trick.
分かってるよ。
本当？
ああ、だから先に降りててくれ。すぐに着替えていくから。
Yuto looked a little relieved as he left the room.
ユウト、ちょっと背が伸びたな。
Yuto and Yui had come here at almost the exact same time I had.
一緒に暮らし始めた頃はどうなるかと思ったけど。
The Shibuya earthquake hadn't just taken their parents from them, it had caused them severe psychological trauma. During the earthquake, Yuto had been trapped in a dark place for a long time, all by himself. As a result, he was still terrified of darkness and being alone. That was why he still clung to his sister. And Yui, after the nightmarish incident she'd gone through after the earthquake, she'd become desperately afraid of men. At first, she was even afraid of me. But over time, we started to open up to one another. When I'd left, they'd seemed to be doing a lot better. And now, Yui had her act together even more. And Yuto was still young, but he did seem a little more grown up than he had before. Even if the world didn't look like it had changed, time was still passing. But what about me? Had I changed?
はい、そろそろいいわよ。それじゃあいただきます。
Dude, that sound, literally, just that sound of boiling water makes me want spaghetti. I really want to, oh.
いただきます。
おほー、すき焼きなんて久しぶりじゃねえか。
何言ってるの、先月もやったじゃない。
なあ、あれは鶏肉だっただろう。牛肉じゃないとすき焼きとは言わねえんだ。
そんな贅沢をする余裕うちにはありません。誰かさんが困ってる人から治療費なんか取れるかとか言っちゃうから。ま、別にいいんだけど。
そういう言い方はねえだろう。もっと尊敬しろ、尊敬。
はいはい。ほらタクル、お椀貸しなさい。よそってあげるから。
Kurusu reached out her hand toward me.
いいよ。
ダメ。 あなた最近ちゃんと食事してなかったんでしょ。遠慮なんてしないの。
Kurusu grabbed the bowl from me and heaped the beaten egg high with meat and vegetables.
はい、ちゃんと食べるのよ。
ああ、うん。
タクルにこっちにもお肉あるから。はい。
もういいって。
何？のの姉のお肉は食べられても私のは食べられないっていうわけ？
お前酔っ払いのおっさんかよ。
おい、ちょっと待てお前ら、もう肉ないじゃねえか。
こういうのは早い者勝ちだっていつも父さん言ってるじゃん。言ってるじゃん。
だからもうちょっと尊敬をだな。
Everyone was seated around a single pot eating dinner. I thought that the only point of dinner was to eat until you were full, but
タクル、ユウト、お肉のおかわりまだ冷蔵庫にあるからね。たくさん食べて。
おいこら。
父さんは少し痩せないとダメでしょ。野菜食べなさい、野菜。
俺はお前をそんな娘に育てた覚えはないんだがな。
覚えがなくても育っちゃったんだから諦めて。
part of me enjoyed sitting around the table and listening to everyone's conversation. No, that wasn't true. Oh god, what is happening? No, this was happy. No, what's happening? I definitely wasn't homesick. Maybe it was just that having someone near me made me feel better. Maybe it was having Kurusu offer to help me when I'd been in trouble on my own. But it definitely wasn't that I was happy to be home, or glad to have come back to where I belonged.
タクルにってば。
What the hell was that? What happened? What the fuck?
お茶いるの？いらないの？
What is happening?
から聞いてるのに全然答えてくれないんだもん。
ああ、ごめん。
そいつのことだ。どうせまた難しいへりくつでもこねくり回してたんだろ
う。へりくつってなんだよ。僕はいつも理路整然と正しい思考を。
はい、ストップ。そんなこといいからお茶は？
ああ、できればマウンテン。
Wow! She hit him with the no one cares.
うちには置いてません。
ユウトったらどうしたの？ニコニコして。
うん。やっぱりみんな揃ってた方が楽しいなって。のの姉ちゃんだってすっごく嬉しそうだよ。
そう？そうね。そうかもね。
Hello, D-Sword. What the hell was with the scary red blinds? What's going on? So what's going on right now? It didn't work. I'd gotten a lot better at seeing my D-Sword. Oh, I see, he's trying to get it. But I still didn't know how to grab hold of it. I'd asked Arimura for help, but her answers weren't really helpful. Unlike with my psychokinesis, all I needed to do was draw my D-Sword from the Dirac Sea. I should be able to do it alone. But when I was by myself, it was just an illusion. Unless I real booted it, I wouldn't be able to use it or attack or defend. If I wanted to use it as a weapon, I needed to share the delusion with someone else, just like my other power. At least that's what Arimura had said. But before that, I needed to be able to grab hold of it.
もう一回。ここから腕を伸ばして剣のイメージを固定化。
It's a cool fucking sword, though. It looks really cool. Whenever I tried to get close to the D-sword, it moved away from me like a mirage. If I just flailed my arm at it, I couldn't reach it.
てかする。
タクル入るわよ。
あ、ちょ、
ああ。
I had my hand stretched out, like a TV hero in the middle of his transformation. And Kurusu was staring at me, her eyes wide.
違うんだ。ユートに新しいヒーローの変身ポーズをだな。
What? She knows about the thing. You could just say you're trying
卒
to.
業したわよ、そういうの。
ああ、そうだっけ。
Kurusu put her hand on her cheek and sighed.
もし自分が本物のヒーローになれると思ってるなら、やめておきなさい。
そんなこと思ってないよ。僕はいくつだと。
いくつになっても子供なんだから、タクルは。
And then she stared into my eyes. I could tell she wasn't blaming me and that she was genuinely concerned.
タクル、ちょっとそこに座って。
いや、これから風呂に入ろうかなと。
いいから座りましょうね。
あ、はい。
I sat down on the bed as I was told.
タクル。
Kurusu took a step toward the bed and looked down over me. Humans are strange creatures. Whenever someone looks down on us, they seem bigger and more powerful. I quickly stood up and looked down over her instead. When I first met her, she was almost at eye level with me, but now...
これは別にやましいことをするための訓練じゃない。
能力のせいで狙われているのに、そうやってむやみに使おうとするのは。
逆だよ。もっとちゃんと使えるようになれば、自分の身も守れるし、もしもの時は新聞部や青葉寮のみんなのことだって助けられる。
I mean, yeah, I think he's got the right idea. Like, they're already after him. That's established.
そういうのは警察の仕事でしょ。
今回の事件、いざって時に警察に何かできるとは思えない。
けど、
クレスこそよく口にするじゃないか。僕らのことを守るとかなんとか。でも、能力者が襲ってきたらどうするつもりなんだ？
それは。
ほら見ろ。やっぱり僕が能力を磨くしかないんだよ。
Kurusu stared down at her feet silently. Then she raised her head and looked at me in the eye.
ねえタクル、私はあなたのことをずっと見てきたわ。だからわかるの。あなたがこの先何を考えるか。
この先？
タクルはね、必ず自分を危険にさらすようなことをする。例えば、自分の力で犯人を捕まえてやろうとか。
I gulped. I hadn't really thought about it yet, but knowing me, I'd probably... No, definitely think that.
なんだよ。能力者でもないくせに余地か。
いつも言ってる
She
でし
just
ょ。
knows you, dude.
能力なんかなくてもね、タクルの行動は簡単に読めちゃうって。とにかくお願い。自分の身を守ることだけ考えて。ねえタクル。お願い。
ああ。
じゃあ約束の指切りね。
Pinky swear? Are we supposed to be little kids? No way. That's embarrassing. It's just the
嘘
two of
つ
you.
い
Come
た
on.
ら針を1000本飲ますどころじゃ済まさないから。
That's really scary. Then the heavens... That ringtone. Then the heavens intervened to save me, and a phone rang out like the Yaller horn. I hadn't gotten a new one yet, so of course it was Kurusu's.
出なくていいのか？
今はあなたと話をしているところでしょ。
でも事件に関係あることかもしれないし。
She must have thought I might be right, because she took out the phone and looked at the screen. And then she looked concerned.
新庄さんだわ。
I had only said it to distract her, but evidently the call really did have something to do with the case. She quickly hit the answer button and put the phone up to her ear. I watched her nervously.
もしもし、クルスです。はい。はい。ええ。
On the other side of the phone, I could hear a note of concern in Shinjo's voice. I couldn't tell for sure, but he seemed to be saying that someone had gone missing.
いいえ、来てません。だいたいこの家を知らないはずですし。え？タクルが？
What? What did I do? Kurusu moved the phone away from her ear and turned back toward me.
山添さんって子、知ってるわよね。
Did we lose her? Did she go missing?
ああ、例の病院の地下室から助け出した子だよ。
その子がね、行
No!
方不明なんですって。
え？
That's not good. She was missing?
タクルが連れ出したりしてないかって。
そんなわけないだろ。今日はクルスたちとずっと一緒だったじゃないか。
そうよね。
ちょっと貸してくれ。新庄さんと話したい。
I reached my hand out toward the phone. Shinjo had given me the location of an office in a multi-purpose building in Sakuragaokacho. Sakuragaokacho. There were rows of desks there, stacked high with paper that I normally would have considered a cornucopia of information. But I didn't have time to worry about them now. I rushed up to Shinjo as soon as I saw him.
あの子がいなくなったって誘拐されたんですか？警察がついててどうして？
いや、電話でも言ったけど、そうじゃなくて。
でも彼女がいなくなったのは事実ですよね。
ちょっとタクル、やめてどうしたの？
悪い。
Uki Yamazoe had reminded me a little too much of Senri Minamisawa, and I had lost control of myself. Kurusu quickly moved to stop me. By the way, Kurusu had come to keep an eye on me. In her words, to make sure I didn't do anything stupid. Apparently that was the right move.
誘拐とかそういうんじゃないんだ。いきなり姿が見えなくなってしまって。
I mean, surely they already checked the hospital basement, right? There's no way he didn't already check there. Like, that literally that would be the first place to check.
だからそれが誘拐されたってことじゃ。
それはないわ。だってこの部屋には私と新庄ちゃん、それにミオちゃんの3人が一緒にいたんだもの。
When they say she disappeared, did she literally disappear? Momose, the CEO of Frisia, had been looking confused and concerned ever since I'd arrived. When I'd first met her the night we snuck into AH Tokyo General, she'd seemed like a loud, boisterous sort of woman, but now she felt kind of tired.
彼女をソファーに座らせて、俺たちはこっちで話をしてたんだよ。で、ふとソファーを見たら、彼女がいなくなっていた。
トイレとかじゃないんですか？
Kurusu pointed at the toilets in the back, but Shinjo put his hand on his forehead, thinking, and said,
真っ先に探したよ。でもどこにもいなくてね。それどころか、窓やドアすら開けた形跡がない。
考えられることは一つだ。彼女はギガロマニアックスだからな。能力を使って自分で出て行ったんだろう。
能力？
Come to think of it, I still hadn't asked. Yeah, what is her power? What power did Uki Yamazoe have?
テレポーテーションとかそういう？
Kunosato whispered an answer, her voice full of hate, without even bothering to look back at me.
よくわからない。
わからないって。
ああ、彼女、俺たちの質問にほとんど応じる様子がなくてね。能力に関しては、久野里さんが探ろうとしたんだが、無駄だった。
そもそも瞬間移動だとすれば、とうの昔にここを抜け出していたはずだ。だが、あいつはそうしなかった。
ただ、ウキ君は少し特殊なようだ。今回はそれにやられたらしい。
特殊？
私ね、少し前から考えていたのよ。ウキちゃんを一度どこかの児童養護施設に預けた方がいいかもしれないって。それでさっき新庄ちゃんとミオちゃんに提案したら快く OK をもらって。
俺は OK なんか出してませんよ。
私もです。
ちょっと黙っててちょうだい。こんがらがっちゃうから。
Momose motioned for them to be quiet.
とにかく OK をもらったの。それで私はウキちゃんを連れて駐車場に降りて車に乗せようとしたわけ。知り合いの施設に相談してみようって。
じゃあ彼女を連れ出したのは百瀬さんじゃないですか。
So why was everyone upset that she disappeared? Momose had taken her outside. There was no mystery there. As Kurusu and I stood there with our mouths hanging open, Shinjo interrupted.
という夢を見たんだそうだ。
は？夢？
違うわ。あれは絶対にあったことよ。だってウキちゃんの手の感触とか車のエンジンをかけた感覚とか全部リアルに残ってるもの。
Hypnosis? It might be hypnosis.
けど、ウキ君を自動車に乗せようとした途端、我に返ったんですよね。そしたら百瀬さんは事務所の中にいて、俺たちと話をしている最中だった。
ええ、そうなの。
俺たちは児童養護施設の話なんて提案されてないし、ウキ君と百瀬さんがここから出ていくのも見ていません。百瀬さんとはここでずっと話をしていただけです。間違いありません。
うん。
なのにウキ君は部屋からいきなり消えた。
どういうことですか？よくわかりません。
多分それが山添ウキの能力なんだろう。彼女を捕獲したら改めて調べてみよう。
Kunosato's use of the word capture pissed me off. I could tell that, like Arimura said, she didn't even think of us as humans. But she didn't have to talk that way about a little girl, did she? Even if she didn't like psychics, did she have to go that far? I glared at her, but Kunosato didn't seem bothered in the slightest.
ウキ君の行き先ですけど、宮代君たちが知らないとなると、あとはあそこしか考えられないですね。
私も今そう思ってたところ。
もしそうだとすれば少しばかり骨が折れるな。
どこなんですかそれ。
Shinjo answered me with a bitter sigh.
君もよく知ってるところだよ。あの子の元の家だ。
So yeah, I guess it just hasn't been very much time. I thought more time had passed. I'm like, did they really not check? Then it just happened, I guess.
そんな。
ウキちゃんたらね、あそこへ返してくれの一点張りだったのよ。
あんな地獄みたいな場所に一体なんで。
さてな、とにかく厄介なことになる前に取り戻さないとな。
タクル、ねえタクル。
見つかったらどうするんだよ。
An hour had passed since we first spoken to Momose at Frisia. Kurusu and I were hiding behind some plants near AH Tokyo General.
新庄さんたちに任せないとダメよ。私たちみたいな素人が出しゃばったりしたら。
それじゃダメなんだ。 山添雨季って子は僕が見つけて青葉寮へ連れて帰る。
どうして？
彼女、今の久野里さんには渡せない。
I'm honestly on board with this. Yeah. I was gritting my teeth hard in anger.
タクル？
Afterward, Shinjo, Momose, and Kunosato had started to come up with a plan to get inside the basement of the hospital. Of course, they weren't going to let us come along. We were told to go home, and at first, that was my plan. But then things changed. Kunosato said that she wasn't sending Uki Yamazoe to an orphanage, but to a research center she was affiliated with. She'd said that they were going to research her power there, but Kunosato had treated not only Arimura and I, but also little Uki, as nothing more than guinea pigs. Yeah. And I'd use the word capture many times.
あの子は苦しい実験から解放されて、やっと地下から出られたっていうのに。
Was Kunosato going to send her right back to the same old life she'd experienced before? Just imagining it terrified me, and it made me come to a decision. I would save her.
もしここであの子を見放したら、また同じことの繰り返しだ。またこの場所で誰かを見捨てることになってしまう。昔僕はクルスの親友だった南沢千里を見捨てて逃げた。それを今でも後悔してる。あの山添って子も実験の犠牲者だ。だから今度こそ僕は助けたい。そんなことくらいで南沢千里が許してくれるとは思わないけど、でも助けたいんだ。
Kurusu's voice choked up. She must have been remembering what happened to her best friend.
タクル、あのね。
え？
本当は、千里は。
彼女のこと何か知ってるのか？おい、クルス。
ごめんなさい。気が動転してしまって。千里はね、渋谷地震で死んだの。あなたのせいじゃないわ。絶対に違う。
クルス。
だから、タクルが責任を感じ続ける必要なんてないの。忘れていいのよ。ね。
Kurusu looked down at her feet. When she did, her hair covered her eyes, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking.
今、クルスは何を言いかけて、何を言いやめたんだろう。
Just as I was about to ask, I heard soft footsteps.
来た。
Momose's van was in the same alley where she'd picked us up before. They had been watching the hospital for a while now. I saw two shadows that probably belonged to Shinjo and Kunosato leave the van and run onto the grounds.
クルス、向こうが動いた。大丈夫か？いけるか？
I tapped her on the shoulder and she looked up. That's why they called her the Empress of Hekiho Academy. There was no trace of the sadness that had been there a moment ago.
ごめんね。ちょっと千里を思い出しちゃって。でも、もう平気よ。
本当はここで待っててもらいたいんだけど。
But I couldn't reel boot on my own. I needed a partner, no matter what.
何言ってるの？あなたのことを心配しながら待ってるなんて、こっちからお断りよ。
だと思った。
We followed Shinjo and Kunosato from a distance. A moment later, they had pressed themselves up against the wall near the rear emergency entrance. Even from a distance, I could tell it was more heavily secured than before. The lock seemed to be a newer and sturdier model. But Shinjo must have already had the key because he took something out of his pocket and started to put it in the lock.
あそこから入るつもりだな。
Alright then. I quickly created an image in my mind. I looked at the key-like object he was holding, and envisioned it flying away.
やっぱりもっと訓練しとくんだった。
The more I started to panic, the more I lost focus. I couldn't make the delusion clear in my mind.
くそ。落ち着け。大丈夫だ。落ち着け。 見えた。
I could see the D sword floating in front of me.
クルス、ちょっと脳を使わせてもらうな。
Let me borrow your brain real quick.
どうぞっていうのもなんか変だけど。
I imagined the delusion I'd come up with going inside Kurisu, Shinjo, and Kunosato's minds. Kurisu gasped a little. She must have felt something. The delusion was shared between us, and instantly, the real boot was complete. Clang! The metallic object in Shinjo's hand rolled away and hit the ground with a clang. Then I heard the two of them gasp. The key rolled along the ground in a very unnatural way until it rolled down a metal sewer gate. Just like I'd imagined. Hell yeah.
バカ、隠れてたくる。
Just as I was about to make a victory pose, Kurisu grabbed my hand and pulled me back. Imagine. Yeah! Whoop! Then she dragged me down onto the ground.
悪い。
調子に乗らないの。これだから私がついてないとダメなのよ。
Her hand was shaking a little. She was probably still scared of my power, no matter how many times she saw it. This was how most people would react. I hesitated a moment, then gripped her hand in return. Then I let it go and looked over at Shinjo and Kunosato. The two of them whispered to each other, then silently headed back toward the van.
今だ。
We kept low as we headed for the emergency entrance. When we reached the door, I turned around toward Kurisu. She caught up a moment later, but her breathing was a little heavy.
すまない。ちょっと早かった。
こっちこそごめん。もっと運動が得意ならよかったんだけど。鍵開けられるの？
多分。クルス、もう一回。いや、何回かやるよ。悪いけど。
構わないわ。そのために来てるんだから。
I stared at the door. The lock was stronger than before, probably because of the time we'd broken in. I imagined the lock flipping and the door opening. There was a heavy click, and the door opened like I'd imagined. Thanks to my power, we were able to make it inside with no trouble. I remembered the route to the room where we found Uki, so we headed there. But as we walked through the darkness, I saw that Kurisu was acting a little strange. Yeah, I imagine she also doesn't have great memories of this place, so...
大丈夫か？
実はちょっと閉所恐怖症がね。でも平気。気にしないで。
平気って、すごい汗だぞ。
And then I realized something.
まさか、傷が痛むのか？
She'd seemed like she was okay, but it had been a really bad injury. It couldn't have fully healed up by now.
おい、クルス。
平気だから。ほら、急ぎましょう。
She pushed me onward before I could stop.
もうちょっとだ。あと少しで例の部屋だから我慢してくれ。
ええ。
That's right. It was right around this corner. Oh, we found her. Suddenly, we heard a voice sobbing in the darkness. Kurisu and I almost leapt into each other's arms. It was the voice of a little girl.
タクル、この声。
Was it a ghost? Dude, what do you mean, was it a ghost? You know exactly who it is. No, that was dumb. Which meant it had to be. Kurisu and I nodded. Like, literally the reason you're here, my guy. And stepped toward the direction of the room. Just like Shinjo had said, the room was completely empty. The beds and the patients that had been confined there were all gone. It was just an empty room. And standing in the middle of the empty room was a crying Uki Yamazoe. How long had she been there? She was crying like a child who'd lost her mother.
いない。誰もいない。誰か返事して。
Kurusu couldn't bear to watch. She ran over and gave the girl a big hug. Soon, Kurusu was crying too.
今までよく頑張ったね。でももういいの。だからお家へ帰ろうね。
But Uki must not have heard her, because she just stood there, crying silently for a long time. I'm crying too. I'm not crying. Not really. I swear. The whole time, there was nothing I could do but watch. Oh, man. That's not fair. That's not fair.
大丈夫？変わりましょうか、タクル。
いいよ。もう目の前だから。
When we finally made it back to Aoba dorm, I took Uki off my back and put her on the sofa. And then I lay flat on the floor with my arms and legs stretched out. She wasn't even that heavy. I was just out of shape.
だから変わるって言ったのに。
運動音痴に任せたら落っことすかもしれないだろう。
失礼ね。そこまで言われるほどひどくないわ。それにタクルよりマシだと思うんですけど。
Kurusu's eyes were red-rimmed. Her face was red from where she'd tried to rub away the tears. She must have been embarrassed by it because she turned away from me and said something mean.
はいはい、わかったよ。その子のこと、父さんに。
あ、うん、そうね。
After Kurusu left to get him, I lifted my tired body off the floor and onto the sofa. As I'd expected, Uki hated the idea of leaving the basement. But after Kurusu's fervent attempts at persuasion and my own insistence that nobody was coming back to the basement, she'd finally clung to Kurusu and started to break down. And as I carried her on my back, she'd gotten tired and fallen asleep. I hadn't had a chance to look the first time we'd gotten into the basement, and that data was probably long gone by now.
父さん、今上がってくるって。
うん。
Kurusu sat next to Uki on the sofa and softly stroked her hair.
この子、捜索願いとか出てないのかしら。
新庄さんの話だと、今のところ該当するデータはないって。
そう。
やっぱり渋谷地震のせいかもしれないな。
After the earthquake, more data on missing persons and casualties had gone missing than you could imagine. And to top that off, this year had seen the largest solar storm in history affect all kinds of electronic devices. Shibuya hadn't been hit that hard, but a lot of data in other regions had been lost.
分かってるのは名前だけか。せめて手がかりでも持っていればいいんだけど。
ののね、タクル兄何かあったの？
The door opened. Yui and Yuto peeked inside.
し
The two of them froze next to the door.
まだ寝てなかったの二人とも。
寝ようと思ってたらのの姉たちの声が聞こえたから。大丈夫？また喧嘩とかしてない？
Kurusu and I looked at each other without thinking.
大丈夫よ。私たち喧嘩なんてしてないから。
本当？だったらいいんだけど。
Suddenly, Yui stopped. She saw the girl sleeping on the sofa, and her eyes went wide. I thought that she was just surprised to see a strange girl sleeping on the sofa, but...
ウキちゃん？
Oh, she knows her? She said something we never expected.
どうしてウキちゃんがここに？
Alright, definitely was not expecting that.
ゆい、知ってるの？この子のこと。
多分。あ、でも待って、そんなはず。
Yui walked over to the sofa and sat down next to Kurusu. Then she stared at Uki Yamazoe.
ごめん、私の勘違いかも。
いや、勘違いじゃない。確かにこの子はウキって名前で。
だっておかしいよ。昔のままの姿なんて、そんなの絶対に変。
昔のままって？
ウキちゃん、私のクラスメートだったんだよ。小学校2年の時の。
And the next morning... Alright, that's interesting.
もう一度整理するぞ。名前は山添ウキ。年齢はユイと一緒だから13もしくは14歳。
うん。
Dad was filling out what looked like a medical chart on his computer.
小学校2年の時にユイと同じクラスだった。だが渋谷地震の少し前から学校に来なくなり、その後どうなったかはユイも知らない。
そう。
で、彼女はその頃、つまり6年前と見た目が全く変わってないとユイは言うんだな。
うん、絶対に変わってないと思う。一応証拠も見つけてきたんだ。
Yui showed us a photo. It was a class photo from her school. I could see a young Yui in a row of children. And in the front row, next to the teacher, I saw Uki.
これ。
どう思うよ、タクル。
他人の空にっていう感じじゃない。
She is.
ウキちゃん本人だよね、やっぱり。
となると成長ホルモンの異常かな。
みんな、ウキちゃんが起きたわよ。
本
おう、連れてきてくれ。
ちょっと父さん？おうじゃないわ。ウキちゃんの前でそんな声出しちゃダメよ。もっと優しく。
これで普通の声なんだがな。
いいから優しくする。
はい。
Dad glared at her and started mumbling about how he hadn't raised her to be like this again.
ウキちゃん、さ、入って。
After a long pause, a small girl entered the room, trembling. Kurusu took her hand and walked her over to a chair, then sat her down. She flinched away from Yui's cheerful voice.
ああ、わからないよね。6年前の私しか知らないもんね。
Yui took out the class photo and pointed to herself.
ほら、これ私だよ。橘ゆい、覚えてる？橘ゆいさん。
Uki looked at the girl in the photo, then at Yui. Then she gave a little start of surprise.
思い出してくれた？はい。お久しぶりです。もう同級生なんだから敬語とかやめてよ。でも
Dad typed something else into his computer as he watched them.
決まりだな。
そうだね。
There was no question of it now. Uki Yamazoe was definitely Yui's old classmate. That would go a long way toward tracking down her family.
けどすごいよ。まさか本当にユキちゃんだったなんて。
We were surprised, but it seemed to be Yui who was the most surprised of all. Her missing classmate had suddenly shown up at her home, and her brother and sister had brought her there. And she looked exactly the same as she had 6 years ago.
ウキちゃん、ちょっと話いいかい？
She must have seen Dad's white coat and gotten nervous, because she suddenly sat up straight. That's really sad. That's really sad.
何か
I hate that.
遺伝的な病気とか言われたことは？成長が止まってしまうとか。
よくわかりません。すみません。
じゃあ君の背が伸びなくなったのはいつか覚えているかな？ユイと同じクラスだった頃はどうだい？
すみません。それもわかりません。でも私地震があってからなんか変になって。
そうか、あの地震の後だね。
はい。
はあ、やっぱり PTSD で成長ホルモンが、いや、あるいはターナー症候群みたいな染色体異常って可能性もあるが。
Turner syndrome. A chromosomal disorder found in women. Primary symptoms include delayed or absent development of secondary sexual characteristics, a lack of a menstrual period, abnormally shaped organs, and decreased height. Interesting. I have never heard of that.
こればっかりは
I love
し
learning
かる
new
べきところで
things.
ちゃんと検査をしなきゃわからんな。
Dad made some adjustments to her chart as he whispered to himself. That look on his face was far more serious than he usually let us see. Yuto poked his head through the door. You could see just this tiny bit of his hair in the corner. He must have been standing in the hallway the whole time and looking in on us.
ユウト、そろそろ行かないと学校遅刻するわよ。
そうだよ、ユウ。
大丈夫、すぐ行くよ。
He seemed a little scared by his sister's scolding. But he summoned up his courage and came inside, then stuck his hand out toward Uki.
これ、あげる。
In his hands was a tiny chocolate bar. It was the kind of chocolate you could buy in huge packs for cheap at the supermarket.
はい、ありがとうございます。こらユウ、ウキちゃんは年上なんだよ。そういう言い方はダメでしょ。
年上？
Yuto looked very confused and a little unsatisfied.
どうしたの、ウキちゃん。
はい、なんだか不思議な気分です。こういうことに慣れていないので。こういうことって？こうして家族が集まってみんなでお話ししたりです。
君の家族はどうしたんだ？
Shinjo had said that she wouldn't tell him anything, but maybe in this environment she'd be more willing to talk.
私が小さい時に私を先生たちのところに置いて 言ってしまいました。
My eyes narrowed when I heard her say the doctors. She was probably talking about the scientists in that underground facility. And then she'd been a victim of their human experiments, just like Senri Minamisawa. Why had her parents done something so horrible to her?
君はそれからずっとあの地下施設に。
So the sass on Yui's face. Like, I don't know if that's supposed to be a sassy face right now, but oh my god. Oh my god, the sass on that face.
はい。
どうして逃げなかったんだ。
お母さんにどこにも行くなと言われたので。そんなのひどい。
Yui put her hand up to her mouth. I could feel the rage boiling over within me.
この子は僕と同じだ。
Her parents had ignored her ever since she was a small child, and eventually they just disappeared. But still, she wasn't able to get away from them.
君はそこで実験の被害者。いや、みんなの世話をしていたけど、それはなぜ？
地震のせいです。
There was a sadness in her eyes as she remembered the people that had vanished.
地震で先生たちは病院からいなくなってしまいました。皆さんのお世話をしていた看護の人たちもです。だから代わりに私がお世話をするようにと病院から言われて。
学校はどうしたんだい？君が今着ているのは碧峰学園の制服だろう？年齢から考えて中等部に在籍してると思うんだが。
碧峰学園？
私たちが通ってる学校よ。ウキちゃんはうちの生徒なのよね。
But Uki shook her head.
これお友達が着てたものです。
友達？
はじめ地下で皆さんのお世話をしていたのは私だけじゃなくて、もう一人同じ年くらいのお友達がいました。時々この服を着ていて、私可愛いねってずっと言ってたんです。
ああ、もしかしてその子、君と違って外から通ってきてた？
はい。
なるほど。碧峰の生徒だったのはそっちの子か。
彼女、最初は私と一緒にお仕事をしてたんですけど、だんだん具合が悪そうになって、お休みも多くなってきて、そしたらある日これをプレゼントしてくれたんです。自分にはもう必要ないから代わりに大切に着てねって。
Uki looked down at her shoes.
だからこのお洋服は私の大事な宝物です。いつも綺麗にして着ています。
When I saw her expression, I understood. Her friend probably knew that she was dying. She'd been a victim of the same horrible experiments as Minamisawa and Uki, and had gotten sick as a result.
それじゃあ、君が老人を連れて外を。
タクル、
Kurusu interrupted me gently.
一度にいろいろ聞くのはやめましょう。
あ、
ウキちゃん、辛いこともいっぱいあると思うし、また夜にでもね。
そうだよな。
それに朝ごはんだってまだだものね。お腹すいたでしょ？
いえ、私はそんな。
Busted. There was a cute little rumble from her tummy. She gasped a little in embarrassment and turned red.
父さんもそれでいいかしら。
ああ、なあ、ウキちゃん。このお姉ちゃんはちょっと辛いが、飯だけはうまい。上で食べてくるといい。
父さん？
Kurusu pursed her lips as she took Uki's hand and stood up.
これチョコレートもう一個あげる。
ありがとうございます。
As she left, Yuto quickly gave her another piece of chocolate. At lunchtime, Ito and I were heading to the club room.
じゃああの山添雨季って子今は青葉寮にいるのか。
ああ、この先どうなるかわからないけど、なんとかしてやりたいとは思ってるんだ。
けどまさかゆいちゃんの同級生とはな。
驚いた。
でもまあよかったんじゃねえの。
よかったって？
ゆいちゃん喜んでたんだろ。
ああ、そういうことか。確かに。
Yui had really looked happy this morning. Normally, she probably tried her hardest to play the role of being Yuto's big sister. But she was still only in middle school. If she ran into a friend, of course it would make her happy.
何がおかしいんだよ。
いや、お前口ではなんだかんだ言いながら結構大事にしてるからな、今の家族のこと。
そんなんじゃないって。
照れるなって。お前にとってもいいことなんじゃねえの、そういう存在がいるってことは。
僕は別に照れてなんか。っていうか、そんなことどうでもいいんだよ。ほら、早く部室行こう。尾上や有村や和樹にも山添のことを話さなきゃ。
Of course, I'd already told everyone to come for an emergency meeting. They should be in the room already.
というわけで、今山添雨季って子は青葉寮で保護されてる。
たく大活躍だったんだね。
いや、それほどでも。
The girls all seemed very impressed. Squeeze, squeeze. Sarika was squeezing her Garo Froggy strap in lieu of applause. It still sounded nothing like it was supposed to, and honestly, I would have preferred the applause, but I was used to it now, I guess.
ダメよセリカ、カズキ。あんまりおだてるといい気になってまた無茶なことするから。
しないって。
Sheesh, I appreciated that she was concerned about me, but Karusu was a little too protective. I especially wished she'd stop it when everyone else was around. It was embarrassing.
けど気持ちいいっすね。今頃新庄さんや久野里さん悔しがってますよ。ざまあ見ろです。ぷぷぷ。
Me and her, we're on the same wavelength. Me and her, that's where our priority is. It's like it's cool that we helped the kid. That's nice. More importantly, we pissed off Kunosato bad.
有村は前から知ってたのか、山添のこと。
And as she said, serves that bitch right.
まあ電話でちょっと話したくらいですけどね。彼女フリージアでは肝心なことはほとんど喋らなかったみたいですよ。多分久野里さんたちを怖がってたんでしょうね。
まあそうだろうな。
それに比べてあの子、宮代先輩の前では割と素直だったみたいですね。先輩ってとぼけた顔して実は女の子の扱いがうまかったりするんですか？
Arimura grinned. Of course I do. I've read every issue of Cool Cat Press that I could find. Don't say that. I couldn't say that though, so I didn't.
違うよ。クルスとユイがいてくれたから。
当たり前じゃないですか。何本気にしてるんです？気持ち悪いですよ。
I was never going to get used to this. For one thing, no matter how hard I tried to glare at her, she just smirked. I was trying to think of a good comeback when the door to the club room suddenly opened. The door opened softly, but it was clear that the person standing in front of it was furious. Okay, as long as she's not here to murder us. Yeah. Speak of the devil. Kunosato was there, and the light in her eyes was as cold and fierce as ever. Please don't commit murder on the school grounds. Please. Instead of yelling, her voice was low and threatening. I figured that she'd eventually find out that we were the ones who'd taken Uki, but I didn't expect her here so soon.
お前どういうつもりだ。
どうって。
あいつは重要な証拠なんだ。勝手なことをするな。
No, she's not important evidence. She's a human being, you psychopath. Kunosato stomped over to me and grabbed me by the lapel. Her arms were so thin, I didn't know where she got the strength. It was like she was filled with some kind of raw hatred that gave her power. Okay. Can someone call the police? Like, not Shinjo, because he lets her get away with shit. Like, but like other police, like actual police. Serika and Kurusu grabbed her and tried to pull her off, but she held on to me tightly.
僕は無理にあの子を連れて帰ったわけじゃないです。
何？
彼女はうちに来るのを望んだんです。あなたたちのところには行かないって言ったんですよ。
That was only a half truth, but I felt like I had to say it anyway.
大体証拠って何なんですか？彼女は物じゃないです。実験動物でもないです。だからあなたには渡せません。
何も知らないくせに貴様。
Her hand gripped me tighter. Can you not? What the hell was going on? What was wrong with this woman? I felt a powerful rage building up within me. There was a low buzzing in my ears, and Kurusu and Serika's shouts suddenly seemed to be very far away. And then I saw the D-sword. Don't kill her. Like, all of a sudden I'm a little worried. It was clearer than it had ever been before. Her face suddenly twisted in pain. I looked at her with blurry eyes and saw that a red mark had formed on her pale white wrist, as if something was digging into it. She was gritting her teeth, and her breathing made it seem like she was trying to endure some kind of incredible pain, but still she refused to let go. Arimura's scream seemed like it was coming from underwater. The new violent temptations within me had almost taken control. What she's trying to do is wrong. I'll never rid of her. What? What she's trying to do is wrong. I'll never rid of her myself. I'm not sure who's saying that or what it means. That righteous anger combined with this power, I can do anything I want. That's not a good way to think. A maddeningly sweet feeling of omnipotence overflowed from within me and refused to stop. That's right. Do it. Just kill the bitch, it screamed. This is kind of what I was worried about. Like, don't do that. I heard Kurusu yell in my ear, and at the same time, I felt a strong slap across the cheek. And then Kunosato and I were pulled apart. I suddenly regained control of my senses. Kurusu, Ito, and Serika had grabbed me and were holding me back, while Arimura and Kazuki were doing the same to Kunosato. At risk of sounding like a toddler, she started it. Kunosato looked at me with eyes full of hate and then pushed Arimura and Kazuki away. Serika quickly grabbed them and held them up. Hey, can you get the fuck out of here, though? Like, go away! Now it was the Empress's turn to get mad.
ここは部外者がいていい場所ではありません。
Get lost. She was clutching her hands into fists so tightly that they turned white, standing between Kunosato and the rest of us as if she was some kind of protector.
あなたが何のつもりでうちのタクルやウキ、それから有村さんにひどい仕打ちをするのかは知りません。でも私はそれを許しません。
お前の許可などいるか。今実際に見ただろ。能力者は危険な。
今すぐお引き取りください。
Kurusu's voice left no room for discussion. Neither of them moved a muscle for a moment.
ちょっと待ってくれ。ストップだ。ストップ
Oh good, Shinjo's here. He can help. And then we heard panting coming from the hallway.
どこへ行ったのかと思えば、やっぱりここか、久野里さん。
It was Shinjo. He must have been running for a while because his hair was messed up and there was sweat on his forehead.
俺に任せてくれと言わなかったか？
あんたの悠長なやり方では大切な証拠が消されてしまう。
焦るのはわかるが、物には言い方というものがだな。申し訳ない、クルスさん。俺たちは何も揉めたくて来たわけじゃないんだ。
じゃあ何のご用ですか？
そう怖い顔をしないでくれるかな。
I like Shinjo, but when it comes to Kunosato, he is just so ineffectual. You know, useless. He's useless. I'll just say it. He's useless. Nothing. He does nothing. Like, Shinjo looked at both of them, troubled. And then he turned toward me.
なあ、宮代君。君の言いたいことはわかる。昨日、浮君を連れ去ったことも別に責めたりしない。確かに俺たちが間違っていたかもしれん。
I feel like we'd probably have a better time talking to him if she were gone. If she could, like, go away.
だから今日はちゃんと頼みに来た。浮君と、あとできれば君と有村さんもしかるべき場所で一度検査を受けてほしいんだ。
はあ
Arimura responded before I could.
新庄さんこそ頭の中見てもらったらどうですか？はーい、私喜んで実験台になりますなんて言うとでも思います？
Like I'd be more willing to consider it, or I think they should be more willing. We would be more willing to consider it if she wasn't involved at all. Like if she just wasn't involved, like if she just hadn't shown up. Like I feel like there would actually be room for discussion here. But the fact that she is anywhere involved, it's like I don't trust you.
話は最後まで聞いてくれ。これは本当に君たちのためなんだよ。
Again, I don't believe you, because she's there. His next words came as a shock to me.
実は今しがた佐久間先生に相談をしてきたんだ。
父さんに？
Both Kurusu and I shouted at the same time.
君たちはその久野里さんのやり方が気に入らないんだよな。だったら佐久間先生の友人の病院ならどうだ？
おい、何を勝手に決めて。
Shut up.
久野里さん。
Shinjo put a hand up to cut her off.
わかるだろ。そうしなきゃ彼らは検査になんて応じないよ。ちゃんと君も同席させるから。
All right, Shinjo, you're putting your foot down. I appreciate it. He's doing something. He's doing something. Kunosato furrowed her brow in anger, then turned around and left the room. Thank God. Shinjo waited until he couldn't hear her footsteps anymore, then sighed a little in relief. Then he continued.
ということで、どうだろうな、宮代君、有村さん。何でも佐久間先生、以前は大学の医学部で准教授をしていたらしいじゃないか。
I didn't know that. Kurusu must not have known it either, because she looked over at me confused.
父さんが准教授？
知らなかったな。
ただの変なおじさんだと思ってた。
おいおい。まあ、あのルックスじゃそう思われるかもしれないけど。
Shinjo laughed, seemingly in sympathy with my dad.
佐久間先生の友人なら信頼できると思うんだけどな。どうだろう。
私はどっちにしても嫌ですよ。
そう言うと思った。
Shinjo chuckled. He was probably anticipating that response.
でもな、有村さん。佐久間先生の話だと、君らの能力は身体に対して良くない影響を与えているかもしれないそうだよ。
え？
山添浮君に会ってくるといい。あれで14歳というのは明らかにおかしいと思うんだ。なあ、宮代君。
It was true that Uki looked the same as she did in her old school pictures. It was like the passage of time had stopped for her. If that was caused by her powers...
浮君に関しては絶対に精密検査をすべきというのが佐久間先生の意見だ。そのついでに宮代君と有村さんも異常がないか見てもらったらどうだろう。まあ人間ドックだと思えばいい。それでもダメかな。
Arimura was still unsure, but it seemed. But what happened to Uki must have bothered her.
少し考えさせてください。
ああ、それで構わない。
まだ OK したわけじゃないですよ。
もちろん。
I looked out the door where Kunosato had just left.
父さんが必要だと言うなら検査を受けてもいいです。けどその途中でもし久野里さんがその山添や有村を実験動物みたいに扱ったりしたら。
I hesitated for a second, unsure of what to say, but then I continued.
僕だって怒ります。能力を使ってその検査なんかできないようめちゃくちゃにしてやりますから覚えておいてください。
A very clumsy threat, but
おいおい。
one that, you know, he can back up.
ダメよ、何言ってるの。
Everyone was shocked at seeing me act so differently than usual. But I remembered the sense of power, of omnipotence that I just felt, and shivered a little. That's right, I could do it. I would do it. If I had to, I could do what I just did.
了解だ。検査中は俺が注意をしておく。それでいいだろ。
Shinjo sighed a little and shook his head. He was probably trying to come up with a way to keep Kunosato quiet and not having much luck.
それじゃあ部活中のところお邪魔したね。
He went to leave the room, but just before he stepped into the hallway, he turned around.
あっといけない。もう一つ大事な話があったんだ。久野里さんのせいで忘れるところだった。
何でしょうか。
It was clear from Kurusu's voice that she was still upset. Shinjo may have been used to dealing with Kunosato, but the Empress was a whole different animal together. He flinched a little.
宮代君と尾上さん、あと伊藤君にちょっとね。
私ですか？
俺何も悪いことしてないっすよ。
してないです。
君たち病院の地下へ不法侵入したじゃないか。
あれはですね。
というかそれを言ったら新庄さんや久野里さんだって。
その通りだ。だから今のは冗談として。
冗談になってね。
本気でびっくりしちゃったよ。
聞きたいことっていうのは実はその地下施設のことでね。
Shinjo's voice dropped several decibels as he continued.
久野里さんの話だと施設の PC に南沢千里という女の子のデータがあったというんだが、
I heard Kurusu gasp a little. Shinjo didn't know about Kurusu and Minamisawa though, so he just looked confused for a moment before quickly continuing.
久野里さんは君たちも一緒に見たと証言してる。覚えはあるかな？
Suddenly hearing that name almost brought back the trauma, but
はい、見ました。
データは確かにあったんだね。
はい。
そうか。
Shinjo looked at Ito and Serika too. They both nodded.
なら、これを確認してほしい。証拠品でね、実物を持ってくるわけにはいかなかったんだが。
He put his hand in his pocket and took out a photo. It showed what looked like an ID card. I couldn't believe my eyes. The card looked old, and it was dirty and scratched in spots. But the name and face on it were clearly visible.
南沢千里。
That's right. The name Senri Minamisawa was displayed under the ID number. The expressionless face in the picture was, without a doubt, the girl I'd seen in the basement.
どうだろう。同姓同名の別人ってことはないかな。久野里さんはこの子に間違いないと言ってるんだが。
間違いないです。
俺もそう思います。
私も。
All three of us answered instantly. Shinjo nodded and put the picture back in his pocket.
そうか。ありがとう。
その子、南沢千里さんがどうかしたんですか？
I asked, trying to say it in a way that wouldn't bother Kurusu.
ゆうべ、そうだな。ちょうど君が浮くんを青葉寮に連れて行ってしまった頃か。新鮮駅付近を警ら中だった巡査2名が連続放火事件の容疑者らしき女を発見した。
えっていうと、私たちを襲ったパイロキネシストですか？
ああ。君らの証言や有村さんに協力してもらった似顔絵と特徴が一致していたそうだ。何よりも火を使ったらしいからね。
Supposedly, I'm told. Those words probably meant...
逃げられたんですね。
職務質問をしようと近寄った途端にやられた。一人は重度の熱傷で、今、病院の ICU にいる。もう一人の巡査は、女を取り押さえようと揉み合いになった。結局、彼も手足を焼かれ、重傷なんだが、その時女が落としたのが。
He patted the photo in his pocket.
は？
That woman had Senri Minamisawa's ID card? Why?
それって、宮代を襲った犯人が、ってことですか
Suddenly there was a loud crash. I turned and saw that Kurusu had gone deathly pale and been forced to grab a table to stop from falling over. Her teacup was lying shattered on the table. The sound was probably from when she dropped it.
クルス？
先輩、大丈夫？
ええ、ごめんなさい。ちょっとめまいがしたものだから。
座ってろ、副部長。
ありがとう。
Kazuki dragged a chair over for her to sit in, and she collapsed down on top of it. Shinjo seemed to realize that something was wrong. He hesitated a moment, and then asked in a soft tone as he could muster.
クルスさん、もしかして君も南沢千里のことを何か知っているのか？
新庄さん、そのことは。
平気よ、タクル。
Kurusu looked up and cut me off. And then she told him how Senri Minamisawa was her childhood friend, and that she was being used as a test subject in the experiments conducted in that basement. And finally...
でも、千里は渋谷地震の被災者として、慰霊碑にも名前が刻まれています。犯人であるはずがありません。
That's how she finished.
そうですよ。地震の犠牲になったんだろうって、久野里さんも言ってましたし。
I quickly added. Shinjo thought for a moment, and then spoke, even more gently than before.
クルスさん、よく話してくれたね。ありがとう。彼女の死の記録が事実かどうかは今警察で再調査を進めている。その状況次第では申し訳ない。改めて署の方で話を聞かせてもらうかもしれない。
構いません。何かの間違いだと信じてますけど。
There was no doubt in her voice. Shinjo chuckled a little.
君の友達を疑いたくはないが、因果な商売でね。犯人の正体はともかく、宮代君と有村さん、君らはまた狙われる可能性がある。用心だけはしていてくれ。
やっぱりそうですかね。
君たちは能力者だとバレてしまったんだ。何かあったらすぐに連絡を。24時間いつでも構わない。あと南沢千里の件に関しては警察から正式に発表があるまで外部に漏らさないでくれ。真偽がはっきりするまでマスコミあたりに騒がれたくない。頼んだよ。
Shinjo took one last worried look at Kurusu, then left the room. Everyone fell silent, lost in their own thoughts. In the end, we cancelled the club meeting, and Kurusu went to the student council to finish up her work. She was still pale. We all got ready to go, but for some reason, no one actually left. Sarika and Arimura were paging through magazines. Kazuki was still silently playing ESO2. Ito and I were thinking about the case and glancing occasionally at the map on the wall. There was a new sticky memo on the map. While I was trying to decide if we should add it, Kurusu had written it down and copied it herself. Killer might be Senri. Her normally beautiful handwriting was a little unsteady. She'd probably been shaking as she wrote it.
南沢千里か。
ああ、
確かに似てたな。ID カードにあった子供の頃の写真と有村の証言の似顔絵。
Arimura looked up from her magazine. She was staring at me. She didn't say it aloud, but it was obvious that she was trying to tell me that she thought so too. I thought back to when we'd been attacked by the pyrokinetic. She was a lot older, but if the girl on the ID card grew up, she might look like that, yeah.
それじゃ僕らを襲ったのは。いや、でもそんな。
なんかもう少し情報らしきものがあればな。
もしかすると、あの子なら何か知ってるかもしれない。
あの子？
ああ。
I hesitated for a moment, but then realized that we weren't getting anywhere as things stood, so I held out my hand toward Ito.
悪いが、スマホ貸してくれ。
お前、まだ新しいの手に入れてないのかよ。
もうじき買うよ。サンキュー。
I took the phone from Ito and dialed the number. After a few rings, I heard a voice I knew well. It was a gruff voice that I'd heard almost every day lately.
はい、青葉いいんです。
もしもし、父さん。僕だけど。
おお、タクルか。どうした？
あのさ、山添さんなんだけど、今どうしてるかなと思って。
ああ、今診察室のベッドで点滴をしてる。軽い栄養失調が見られてな。お前が言うようにかなり劣悪な環境にいたんだろう。
今って電話に出られるかな？
眠ってはいないから大丈夫だとは思うが、ちょっと待ってろ。
I could hear him get further away from the phone. A second later, I heard a loud, high-pitched girl's voice.
ちょっとタクル兄、ウキちゃんは治療中なんだから邪魔しちゃダメだよ。
お前の大声の方が治療の邪魔じゃないのか。
Yui had probably been so worried about Yamazoe that she'd raced home after school. It was great to see her being such a good friend, but right now it was a huge nuisance.
ああ、いいから山添さんに代わってくれ。大事なようなんだ。
後じゃいけないの？
これ、絶対に内緒な。できればクルスには聞かせたくない話なんだ。お前も黙ってろよ。
There was silence on the line for a moment as she thought, but eventually she reluctantly agreed.
わかった。待ってて。
Since it was just me, she probably didn't feel the need to hit the hold button. I could hear doors opening and closing as she went into the exam room. There was some whispering, and then I heard another girl's voice.
もしもし。
ああ、急にごめんな。具合良くないのか？
大丈夫です。私は平気だと言ったんですが、佐久間先生とゆいさんが心配してくださって。
そっか。
I was relieved to hear that she wasn't in bad shape. What I was about to ask her might be bad for her mentally.
な、もしかして南沢千里って子知ってたりしないか？
はい。
南沢千里。記録によると渋谷地震まで君と同じ施設に通っていたはずなんだ。年齢は6年間だから12歳くらいかな。
南沢千里さん。
そうだ、どんなことでもいい。彼女について何か覚えていることはないか？
南沢さん、南沢さん。
She seemed to be trying her best to remember. I saw that the rest of the newspaper club, not just Ito, but Serika, Arimura, and Kazuki as well, were staring at me and trying to hear the conversation. Yamazoe thought a little more before she spoke.
直接会ったりお話ししたことはないです。
でも
何度か治療室に入っていく姿を見かけたことがあります。あの子は私よりも辛い治療をしてるって。だから私も頑張るようにって先生に言われました。
I remembered the experiments I'd seen as a little kid, and the tiny girl crying for help, and I shivered. But Uki had it far worse than I did. She'd actually been exposed to the same torture that Senri Minamisawa was.
ごめんな。嫌なこと思い出させて。
いいえ、私はそれが嫌なことだとは思っていませんでしたから。
そっか。他に何か覚えていることはないか？
そうですね。南沢さんは随分と足が悪かったみたいです。
足？
はい。私が見かけた時はいつも片足を引きずっていて、先生に支えられるようにして治療室へ入っていきました。
片足を引きずって。
That does match.
なので私はてっきり施設で足の治療をしているんだと思っていたのですが。
Dragging her leg? Wasn't that the same thing the pyrokinetic was doing?
宮代さ
ん。いや、ごめん。また何かあったら聞くよ。ありがとう。
はい。それではゆいさんに電話を
そのまま切っちゃってくれ。うるさいから。じゃあまた後で。ちょっと、
なんか聞こえたよ。うるさいって何？
I hung up the phone before she could finish and handed it back to Ito. Then I looked at the map again. I saw the 2 notes that Kurusu had written in a trembling hand. Pyrokinetic found. The woman had Senri's ID card. Pyrokinetic/killer might be Senri.
あの女は本当に南沢千里なのか？
It's looking more and more likely.
でも彼女はもうこの世にはいないんだろ？副部長が言うように慰霊碑にも名前があるし。
なあ、でも地下で見たデータでは行方不明になってた。
だからそれは。
そう、 新庄さんにも言ったけど、僕はそれが彼女の死を意味すると思い込んでいた。クルスもそう言ってたし。けどもしそれがデータ通り本当に行方がわからないだけだとしたら。
どういうこと？
Serica was looking between me and the map in confusion.
尾上も覚えがあるだろ。AH 東京総合病院は渋谷地震の時災害拠点病院の一つになっていた。被災者のデータはいくらでも共有できたはずだ。
そうなるとちょっと変ですね。慰霊碑に名前があるってことは、どこかの病院あるいは警察で彼女の死亡が正式に確認されたってことですもんね。
だろ。あんな実験までやっていた連中が大事な被験者の死亡情報を見逃すはずがない。
確かに行方不明なんて書かないよな、普通。
Ito crossed his arms and thought.
ってことは死亡したっていう情報が間違い、もしくは嘘か。
新庄さんは多分それを疑ってる。南沢千里という子はまだ生きていて、そして僕たちを狙ってるってことだ。
The red sun was about to sink below the buildings on the horizon. I looked out the window and saw that the sunlight had illuminated the clouds and formed a brilliant twilight, but soon it would disappear and the cold night would come.
でもさ、仮に犯人が南沢千里だとして、なんでお前を襲うよ。
それはわからない。なぜか能力者を恨んでいて、たまたま僕が引っかかったのか。
だったらわざわざニュージェネの狂気事件をなぞる必要なくね？宮代の推論通り、犯行に何かメッセージがあるとすれば別だけどな。
Some kind of message. Back then, when Senri Minamisawa had begged me for help, I'd left her there. I was just a kid. What could I do? No matter how much I told myself that, she probably wouldn't agree. She'd thought I was a ray of hope, and I'd left her there and ran. It wouldn't surprise me if the memories of that turned into hatred and rage that she would never forget. And after she was set free during the Shibuya earthquake, she attacked me.
Huh?
Suddenly I remembered the time when she'd attacked me. The smile on her face had chilled me to the bone. And this is what she'd said.
見つけた。
まさか復讐？
Was this whole thing Senri Minamisawa's way of getting revenge on me?
そんなわけあるか。
I realized what I was thinking and slapped my hands against my cheeks to drive the thought from my mind. Alright, I gotta go. It's... I normally... I want to play for longer, but I gotta get something to eat. Alright. Dude, this is getting so, like... The plot has not only thickened, it is like solid. The plot is so thick right now. Alright. Bye, I gotta go. Bye.